Who wants to play some Dungeons and Dragons? Well, too bad. We're playing Magic the Gathering. But it is the Dungeons and Dragons Magic the Gathering set, Adventures in the Forgotten Realms. And yeah, let's hop right in. I like to do one sealed event per set with Magic the Gathering Arena. I will say there is a pretty bad return on investment in terms of sealed events. It's just, you gotta basically win the thing to get your money back, so I wouldn't recommend doing more than one. But doing one I think is generally worth it. It helps you learn the format, helps you kind of see what things are about without the pressure of a draft on you trying to read all the cards in real time. And speaking of which, we are going to be reading pretty much every card in my pool because I'm fairly new to the set too. So it'll be fun to show you a live evaluation of the cards as we go here. But I do know some of the cards from Commander, such as Orcus here, but we'll go ahead, we'll talk about all our rares, and we're going to go through our entire pool, talk about the rest of our cards, and then we'll pick out which colors we're in. So typically you end up in 2 colors in sealed, although some sets allow you to kind of splash into a 3rd color, or sometimes even 4th. But sealed, it's a little bit harder to make the fixing work to get into a 3rd color, just because generally you don't really have the options to pick out which dual lands work for you, right? So there's a few different mechanics in this set, one of which is venturing into dungeons. That's not actually in our rares here, so we'll talk about it when we get to the main pool. But another big one is these man lands, and there's a cycle of rare man lands, which are lands that turn into creatures. And these are some of the best rares in this set. So the fact that we got Cave of the Frost Dragon is a pretty big draw towards white. So what Cave of the Frost Dragon does and what all the other man lands do is they come into play untapped as long as it's one of the first 2 lands you play. So similar to a fast land, if you're familiar with those dual lands, they do the same thing where if it's one of your first lands, you get to play it untapped, and then it taps for a white mana. So pretty powerful stuff. It's like if you slot out of Plains for this and you play it as one of your first 2 lands, there's no downside. And the upside is you can pay 5, and then Cave of the Frost Dragon becomes a 3/4 white dragon with flying until the end of the turn. It's still a land. So this is really powerful, just having a threat in our mana base that we can sort of, if we're out of action, if we've got nothing better to do, if we just need a little bit more to get to lethal, just having this utility in our mana base is just going to put us way ahead of our opponent. And even if you know, 8 out of 10 times we're only going to use this as a land, those times we do use it as a creature are going to be really, really important. So Cave of the Frost Dragon, a pretty big draw towards white here. We also have another white rare, Loyal Warhound. So Loyal Warhound is a 2-mana 3/1 with Vigilance, and when it enters the battlefield, if an opponent controls more lands than you, search your library for a basic Plains card and put it onto the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. So this is a great sort of catch-up mechanic. Unlimited, a lot of the times you lose is because you start missing land drops. You have to keep a 2-land hand. You can't really mulligan it, or if you already mulliganed and you're still at like 2 lands, you're like, I just need my 3rd land. And this helps you kind of get out of those situations where, yeah, you might miss a land drop or 2, but you can kind of dig yourself back out of that hole and get back into the game. So I think this is a pretty good card. It's not like one of the most busted rares in this set, but it is fairly good. So 2, a pretty good white rare, and I think a really good white rare. And then we've got one more white rare that we'll look at here, which is Teleportation Circle. I actually do know this card because, again, it's a card that's going to be pretty good in Commander, but what it is a 4-mana enchantment that says, at the beginning of your end step, exile up to 1 target artifact or creature you control, then return to the battlefield under its owner's control. So take our Loyal Warhound, for example. It has an enter the battlefield ability. When it comes into play, we get to go get a Plains under certain circumstances. So if we have a lot of cards like that in our deck, a lot of cards with enter the battlefield ability, we actually kind of need a lot for Teleportation Circle to be worth it. But if we do have a lot, then Teleportation Circle is just going to be busted, just getting us an enter the battlefield ability every single turn of the game, being able to repeat all of our good ones. So it will depend on our pool if we'll be able to play this. This is very much a, either unplayable card or quite good depending on what our deck is, and there's not really much in between. You can't just be like, I got some enter the battlefield abilities, I'll play this. It's not going to work for you. So in draft, this is probably a lot better because you can pick this early in draft and say, okay, I'm going to get all the enter the battlefield abilities I possibly can now. So Teleportation Circle, we'll see. Take a look at our pool, see if it works out. But if it does, it'll be quite good, I think. And then we got 3 more rares not in white. First off, we've got Zorn. So Zorn is a 3-mana 3/2 that says, if you would create 1 or more treasure tokens, instead create those tokens plus an additional treasure token. So this is quite good because the kind of sub-mechanic of red-black in this set is creating treasure tokens. If you have this in a red-black deck, this is going to be great. And if you can even just once double up your treasures, you're going to be pretty happy with Zorn. Because a 3/2 body as a fail case, a 3-mana 3/2 is not terrible. It's not a disaster if you can't quite get it. Zorns are also the ugliest creatures in D&D. I know a little bit about D&D, so I guess I'll talk about what I know when I see it, but you can kind of see that treasure sub-theme also showing up here on Orcus. He doesn't actually make treasures, but he's got a lot of benefit to you making a bunch of treasures, you having a bunch of leftover treasures as you're doing your red-black thing. You can use them all to kind of pump up Orcus's X cost. So Orcus, Prince of Undeath, is a legendary demon, a 5/3 flying trample for 4 mana at least, but it also has an additional X you can pay. So first and foremost, just a 5/3 trample flyer for 4 mana is pretty good. That's a pretty good threat. Your opponent can't chump it with little 1/1 flyers if they can make those. It's going to be killing your opponent pretty quick and pretty much demands to be answered. So that's the baseline. But again, you can pay an additional X as you're casting it, and when Orcus enters the battlefield, for how much X you paid, you can either give all of the creatures -X until end of turn and you lose X life, or return up to X target creature cards with total mana cost X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. They gain haste until end of turn, so just ridiculous. I mean, there's just the fact that this can either come into play and kind of wrath the board, and kind of just kill all the creatures if we needed to, or the fact that this gives everything haste that we pull out of our graveyard means that this can just be a really out of nowhere kill our opponent on the spot kind of card. We can pull a dragon out of the graveyard, give it haste, and just smash our opponent in the face. So Orcus is very, very good. I think probably the best of our rares. I would even say better than Cave of the Frost Dragon, despite me talking about how great these cards are. Orcus is just the real deal, I think. Gonna be a great commander too. So these give us a pretty good little red-black strategy here. Zorn and Orcus, kind of, if we have a lot of stuff in red and black that makes treasure, we've got 2 pretty good payoffs. Even though this doesn't look like a treasure payoff, it really is. So we'll move on to our last rare here, Gelatinous Cube. So a black rare. So we do go red-black. That's kind of interesting. We got another black rare. And it has Engulf. So this is another thing in this set that I should probably explain. So there's ability words in this set that don't actually do anything. It's like in most other sets, if you saw Engulf as an ability word, as, italicized like it is here, that would mean that Engulf is going to show up in other cards in this set. It's going to show up, you should basically learn what it does, right? Because you're going to be seeing it a lot of times. But this set, it's not the case. This is basically a Dungeon and Dragon ability or attack or something you can do in Dungeons and Dragons in general. And you'll see just like dozens of these in this set that only show up on one card. So you don't need to learn what Engulf does. It's just a bit of flavor, basically. This is what the Gelatinous Cubes of D&D would do as their action. So that's all that is. But it has Engulf. When Gelatinous Cube enters the battlefield, exile target non-ooze creature an opponent controls until Gelatinous Cube leaves the battlefield. And then it has Dissolve as another ability where you can pay X and black to put target creature card with mana value X or less exiled with, or target mana value X exiled with Gelatinous Cube into its owner's graveyard. So basically, enters the battlefield, exiles something, and then when you pay that additional dissolve cost, it kind of goes to the graveyard. So if they kill Gelatinous Cube, then it doesn't come back, right? That's kind of the downside of Gelatinous Cube on its face, is you play it, your opponent kills it, they get their creature back. So by dissolving it, it's not going to come back. And so this is kind of like Ravenous Chupacabra, except a rare instead of an uncommon. But Ravenous Chupacabra was very good, and this does have better stats, to be fair. A little bit worse ability, and it's a very nice combo with Teleportation Circle, something to keep in mind. If we wanted to go black-white, this is really, really powerful. Being able to blink our Gelatinous Cube over and over and over again, just dissolving our opponent's creatures over and over and over again, is pretty nice. So just looking at our rares here, it'll depend on what our pool is. If we just don't have enough white cards, we can't play white. It doesn't matter how good our rares are, right? But just looking at our rares here, I see a good black-white deck or a good red-black deck would be my guess. So let's move on to our pool and see what we actually got. Again, I'm going to go through all the cards, talk a little bit about each of them, just because A, I'm learning the set, and B, it might help you too. So first and foremost, we got Ranger's Hawk. So this is a 1/1 flyer for 1. You can pay 3, tap another untapped creature you control, and venture into a dungeon, activate only as a sorcery. So first and foremost, 1 mana, 1/1 flyer are typically not good enough, even in Sealed. In Limited, they're typically not good enough, but even in Sealed, which is kind of like as low stakes, low power as sets usually get, it's just not enough. A 1/1 body just doesn't do enough. But typically, when Wizards has been putting these in sets recently, it's because there's something more you can do with it. There's some equipments you can slap on it, or some auras you can slap on it, where this 1/1 body, because it has evasion, is actually more useful than it looks. So that's what we would want to put this Ranger's Hawk in our deck. Some way to make take advantage of the 1/1 flying aspect. Because I think the activated ability is actually terrible. So we'll talk a little bit more about its ability in a second, but first let's talk about venturing into dungeons, because this is one of the biggest mechanics of the set. So dungeons there's 3 dungeons you can go into, and when you venture into a dungeon, like this card says, you get to choose one of those 3 dungeons to enter. There's the Dungeon of the Mad Mage, there's the Tomb of Annihilation, and then there's some other one called like Feldrin or something. But they're basically, it depends on what the strategy of your deck is. That'll decide which one you want to pick. So if we do choose the Dungeon of the Mad Mage, which is the one that it's showing here on the right, when we venture into this dungeon, we would first enter the first room, which says the Yawning Portal. So first we would enter that room and use its ability, which is to gain a life. Then the next time we venture, we would, instead of choosing one of the 3 dungeons, we're already inside the Dungeon of the Mad Mage, so we would just go to the next level, dungeon level, which is, lets us Scribe 1. Then the next time we venture, we get to choose between Goblin Bazaar and Twisting Caverns. Then the next time, you get the idea. We keep going through the dungeon, level by level. We get to choose when there's a branching path, and eventually we end up at Mad Wizard's Lair, which is just draw 3 cards, reveal them, and then cast one of them without paying the cost. So a really powerful last ability. But to get there, you're gonna have to venture many times to get all the way to the end of the Dungeon of the Mad Mage. And so that's sort of the trick of the 3 different dungeons. Dungeon of the Mad Mage is the longest one. So if you have a deck that lets you venture like a million times, that's the primary strategy of your deck. You just want to venture and get a lot of value out of that. Then you'll probably want to go down Dungeon of the Mad Mage, because it has the best payoffs. Even by the time you're getting to Runestone Caverns, you don't have to get all the way to Mad Wizard's Lair. You're already getting a lot of good value from Dungeon of the Mad Mage. Whereas Tomb of Annihilation is kind of the opposite. Tomb of Annihilation is all about finishing a dungeon as fast as possible, because there are cards in the set that specifically care about finishing dungeons. They specifically say when you finish a dungeon, you get some extra benefit, right? Or if you have finished a dungeon, this creature gets an additional ability, right? So you could build a deck that just cares about finishing a dungeon as fast as possible so that you get these extra benefits. So if that's what you care about, then Tomb of Annihilation is a lot shorter than Dungeon of the Mad Mage. You can even get through it with 3 ventures, although you have to take some damage to do that. And then finally, the last one, the Feldrin, whatever it's called, that's basically the I don't really have a plan venture option, right? If you don't want to go, if your plan isn't to venture a million times, if your plan isn't to finish a dungeon as fast as possible, then it's basically the middle option. You just have some venture cards in your deck. It's just sort of something you're doing in general, but it's not really the whole purpose of your deck. Then you probably want to take that middle dungeon. And I think in Sealed and in Draft even, that'll probably be the dungeon you pick more often than not. And you know, a lot of times you're just going to have venture in your deck, but not having a dedicated venturing into dungeon strategy. So that'll be the kind of the standard one you pick. But those are the 3 options, and the actual effect of Ranger's Hawk is that it can pay 3 mana, tap itself, tap another untapped creature you control to venture into a dungeon, and then only activate it as a sorcery. So that ability is just god-awful. It's an ability of last resort. If you've got nothing better to do with your Ranger's Hawk, if you can't find an equipment to slap on it or some other way to take advantage of its 1/1 flying body, then this is sort of what you can do as a backup strategy. But I can't imagine you put this in your deck thinking, I love that ability, I'm going to use it as much as possible. I think 3 mana tapping 2 creatures at sorcery speed is just too much to venture one time, unless that's just the best you got and you got nothing else going on. So that's my opinion on Ranger's Hawk. I think it's kind of like you need the deck for it, right? If you've got some ways to take advantage of the fact that it's an evasive 1-drop, some equipment or something like that you could slap on it, then it's probably okay in a deck like that. But in general, I don't think you just put it in your deck, like any white deck, and be happy about it. We've also got You're Ambushed on the Road. So this is a 1-mana instant, and these are my favorite cards of this set. They're sort of like D&D scenarios. They impose upon you a pretty normal D&D happening, something that would happen in a typical Dungeons & Dragons adventure that you and your party would have to decide, how are we going to handle this? And you get to decide how to handle it in the game of Magic the Gathering too, because you have multiple choices on these cards. So this one is You're Ambushed on a Road. And we have two options. We can either make a retreat, which means return target creature you control to its owner's hand, or stand and fight, which means target creature gets +1/+3 until the end of the turn. So this is pretty flexible. I think these cards are at their best when their two different modes are situational in different ways, right? And I think this one kind of fits the bill. This gives us a way to save our creature at 1 mana. By save, I mean put back into our hand, so we do have to recast it, but it is... that's a pretty situational effect, something you wouldn't just want a whole card doing, but we have the additional effect of stand and fight, which means we can give a creature +1/+3, which is a pretty situational buff. I mean, most times +1/+3 isn't really the buff you would choose. It can save you from a burn spell, it can save, sometimes it'll let you win a combat under a pretty specific situation, or let you save a creature that would have died because of an opponent's pump spell or something, but it's a pretty situational buff that you wouldn't always be able to take advantage of. But I think the two options here make the card playable. I don't think it's like one of the best of these choose, your blankety blank type of cards where you choose an option for the scenario. I think there's definitely better ones, but this is, I think it's playable. It's flexible enough that it's playable. I wouldn't be unhappy about putting this in our deck, especially if we have a lot of good enter the battlefield abilities, because then sometimes we might actually just want to pick up our own creature just so we can play it again and get that enter the battlefield ability again. So that's another thing to keep in mind, is that it goes really well with enter the battlefield abilities especially, but I don't think that's enough to just run it by itself. But moving on, we got a +2 Mace, a card that's infamous for just destroying a lot of websites that keep track of cards across the internet, because it starts with a plus, which SQL does not like. But it's a +2 Mace, pretty standard fare for Dungeons & Dragons, and it's a 2-mana equipment. It equips for 3, and it gives a creature +2/+2. So typically, I think you want your equipment to either make your creature, like every creature it equips to, a problem for your opponent, or you have to have some sort of other reason to be playing an equipment, some sort of artifact theme or equipment theme. And I think +2 Mace almost gets there. I don't think it's quite where I would be happy playing it just in a vacuum. If we had a lot of, evasive threats like Ranger's Hawk, it gets better for sure. But just on its own, +2/+2 for equip 3, I don't think is quite good enough to want us, for us to want to run it and in a deck without any additional upsides or build arounds in that regard. Having 2 of them is pretty interesting. You can see these 2 pips up here means that we got 2 of them in our pool, and so that means we can kind of build around that strategy a little bit more easy. If we do have a equipment strategy, which is the red-white sort of theme in the set, is equipment based, or if we just do have a lot of like evasive flyers and blue and white, it's something we can do with that as well. So it is kind of interesting. It is having 2 of them does make it kind of better. It makes it easier to build around, which I think we do need to do with +2 Mace. Moving on to Dawnbreaker Claret, or Dawnbringer Cleric. It is a 2-mana 1/3, so good defensive body, and when it enters the battlefield you choose 1. So this is, again, these ability words don't actually, nothing you have to memorize, they're just only on this card in general. And what this says is Cure Wounds, we either gain 2 life, Dispel Magic, destroy target enchantment, or Gentle Repose, exile a target card from a graveyard. So I think when you're going to be really happy with this card is when you choose Dispel Magic, right? When it's a 2-mana 1/3 that enters the battlefield and blows up one of your opponent's cards, it's going to be, just like an awesome card. The other options, if you exile something of importance out of your opponent's graveyard, nice. I'm not sure how much that'll actually come up. It's going to be, I think, even rarer than destroying an enchantment. But there are some pretty good enchantments in the set. We might actually see some as we go through, but there's these things called class enchantments that are very powerful, and it is nice to have a main deck way to sort of answer those, because they do become problems otherwise. There's also enchantment-based removal like Minimus Containment, which we'll talk about in a bit. But in general, I think this is an okay card. It's not quite something like Charming Prince, because Charming Prince, I think, you pretty much always were happy. You always had an option that you were appreciative of with Charming Prince. But Dawnbringer Cleric, I think there's sometimes where you won't, right? You'll enter the battlefield and you gain 2 life just because none of the other options really help you. But if you're up against like a controlling deck that the 2 life isn't going to matter, then it's effectively just a 2-mana 1/3 body. That's not really worth a card. So it'll depend on... I don't think it's great, but I think it's definitely good enough to put in your deck. Moving on to Loyal Warhound, we've already talked about him, but yeah, good card. Paladin Shield, so this is another equipment. 2 mana flash, and when it enters the battlefield, attach it to target creature you control. Equipped creature gets +0/+2, and it has an equip cost of 3. So this is bad, right? I was saying +2 mace almost gets there as an equipment you could play even without a build around. I don't think Paladin Shield does. I think this is only something you play if you very specifically have a reason to want it in your deck, right? I don't think the fact that you can maybe save your creature against a burn or let them survive a combat, but not really win a combat that they would have lost, you know, just kind of survive it maybe. You know, there's going to be situations where this blows you out, right? And you're going to be like, oh man, that really crushed me. But I think more often than not, it's just going to be not even close to being worth the card. And that equip cost for what it's giving you is just too much. So if you have a reason to want artifacts or equipment, then sure, but I don't think it's worth running otherwise. Here's another one of the situation cards. You hear something on watch. So this is a 2-mana instant, and you have 2 options to either rouse your party, which means creatures you control get +1/+1 at the end of the turn, or set off traps, and this spell deals 5 damage to target attacking creature. This is a fantastic one of these cards, one of these scenario cards. This might even be the best one. Probably not. There's probably one I'm not thinking of that's better, but this one is fantastic because you can see where both of these effects are really situational, right? Super situational effects, but they're both very different situations, which means you're bound to run into one or the other, and when you do, when you're in these situations, they're very good, right? So 2 mana instant speed, give all your creatures +1/+1 until end of turn. That's great for finishing out the game if you've gone wide. That's great for really messing up a combat for your opponent. You know, there's just a lot of situations where you wouldn't want a whole card dedicated to this because +1/+1 still is ultimately kind of situational, but just having that as one option on the card, and really the secondary option on the card, I think is really, really strong because really this is a removal spell, right? Really you're going to set off traps most of the time. That's what you want to be doing with this, right? You want to be dealing 5 damage to target attacking creature. It's basically destroy target attacking creature most of the time. And 2 mana kill a creature is very good, especially in white. So, you know, obviously the downside of that is it's a really situational kill spell. That has to be a creature that's attacking you. And if you're on the offensive, if you're the one who's ahead on board, pushing your advantage, trying to close out the game, then you don't want this removal spell, right? Because your opponent's not going to be the one attacking you. It's going to be the other way around. But in those situations, rouse the party is really good. Giving your creatures +1/+1 when you're on the offensive trying to close out the game is really good. So this one is good in different situations and really good in those situations, which makes it one of the best of these effects, much better than your ambushed on the road. Although, again, still a playable card, but I'd be happy putting this in pretty much any deck. It's going to be, I think, pretty much always good. Moving on, we've got Minimus Containment. So this is a really good removal spell, actually. 3 mana, enchant non-land permanent. Enchanted permanent is a treasure artifact with you know, it's the typical treasure effects, and it loses all of their abilities. So you basically just 3 mana turn something into a treasure, which is pretty good. I mean, it's 3 mana effectively kill anything, you know, any artifact, any enchantment, any creature. And I was just talking about those class enchantments. Those are really problematic if you have no way to answer them in the format. They can easily win the game by themselves. And being able to, there's some powerful artifacts in the format as well. And, you know, even if you point this at a creature 9 times out of 10, having a way in your main deck to just deal with anything is really nice. I think this is like the premium white removal. I'm gonna run this in every single white deck. So having this is a pretty nice pull towards white. But speaking of like the best white commons, Priest of Ancient Lore might even be better than Minimus Containment, arguably, but it is a very good card. I know about this one also for EDH purposes. This is a 3 mana 2/1 Dwarf Cleric. When it enters the battlefield, you gain 1 life and you draw a card. So white is finally getting to dip its toe into something that pretty much all the other colors have been able to do for a while, but an enter the battlefield, draw a card. This means that this immediately replaces itself. No matter what happens, you have not gone down a card by playing Priest of Ancient Lore. If your opponent kills it, then whatever, it already replaced itself, and it gained you a life to boot. So if you have life gain strategies, which there are in the format, it's even better in that regard. It's a great thing for like an equipment-based deck because it gives you a body to put equipment on that basically didn't even take a card. You just kind of got a free body on the battlefield to slap all your equipment on. Even if 2/1 isn't that great of a body, it's free, right? You didn't spend a card on it, so it's fantastic. So yeah, fantastic card. We've got some good white cards for sure. Between Minimus Containment and Priest of Ancient Lore, and you hear something on watch, white is looking pretty good. Rally Maneuver, which is a 3-mana instant. Target creature gets +2/+0 and gains first strike until end of turn, and up to one other target creature gets +0/+2 and gains lifelink until end of turn. So a hard card to evaluate. Just looking at the first one, which is the one that's going to really change combat. 3 mana for +2/+0 and first strike can win you a lot of combats that you would have otherwise lost, but it is 3 mana, and combat tricks tend to get a lot worse the further up you go in mana. A 1 mana combat trick is oftentimes worth it, 2 mana it's oftentimes not, and 3 mana it's got to be quite good before you're happy doing this. This is, I think, a pretty powerful pump, right? +2/+0 is going to mean your little dude, your little 2/2 is going to eat their 4/4. Like, it's not trading, it just gets to straight up eat their 4/4. And the +2/+0, or and +0/+2 and gaining lifelink can be a big deal. You know, if we do something like that on our loyal Warhound, we get to gain 3 life and maybe eat an aggressive attacker that we would have otherwise traded with. So, could really be a big boon against an aggressive deck. I would say I would prefer not to run this. I think I would avoid this if I could. It'd probably be like the first card I cut. If I'm at like 24 playables, I'd probably cut this one, just because 3 mana combat tricks are, unless they can kind of like win you the game out of nowhere, to some like, you know, +2/+2 and double strike where it can just literally turn the game around by itself. If it's not that, then it's sometimes hard to justify, and it's pretty clunky leaving something like this up on your opponent's turn, hoping they attack in, they don't attack in, and then you just wasted 3 mana because this doesn't do anything without combat. So I would say I would avoid this. It is uncommon, which is something to take note of. Usually when cards are uncommon, it's either because they're really terrible and situational and they're more for constructed play, which this is not, or they're really annoying, right? They're good enough to be annoying, so that's something to keep track of, is maybe this is better than it looks. So yeah, I mean, I would be happy running it as an experimentation, but I would suspect it's not too incredibly good. Moving on to Borealia Pegasus. So this is a 4 mana 2/3 flyer, which is an okay aggressive body. When it enters the battlefield, target creature gets +1/+1 and gains flying until end of turn. So this is fine in an aggressive deck. It'll be pretty lacking in a defensive deck. It does mean you can sit back and block your opponent's little dorky flyers if you played in a defensive deck, but you know, it's clearly built with an aggressive deck in mind. Probably fine. Then we got Teleportation Circle. We've already talked about that. We'll have to see which colors we end up in before this is worth it. But just looking at our white, we do have stuff like Dawnbreaker Claret. We do have Priest of Ancient Lore, which is fantastic to blink repeatedly. We have our Borealia Pegasus, but that doesn't really work with Teleportation Circle because this happens at our incept. So Borealia Pegasus, even though it has an Enter the Battlefield ability, it doesn't really work. So far, we don't see a ton of stuff. You know, Loyal Warhound does have one that's we might get some benefit out of repeating, we might not. But if we end up in another color with a lot of Enter the Battlefield abilities, maybe it makes the cut. Currently, just looking at white, I wouldn't run it, but we'll see. Moving on to White Dragon. So each color has a dragon. Again, this is from D&D, where monster manuals, you know, will have white dragons, red dragons, black dragons, green dragons, gold dragons, you know, all sorts of different color dragons, and each of the colors in this set has one as well. So White Dragon is a 6 mana 4/4 flyer with Cold Breath. When it enters the battlefield, tap target creature an opponent controls. That creature doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step. So I would say that White Dragon isn't one of the most powerful of the dragons. I think something like Blue Dragon or Red Dragon is a little bit better, but it's still good. I mean, a 6 mana 4/4 flyer is a pretty good way to finish out the game. It does sort of temporarily deal with another threat for at least one turn, right? And it is something pretty good to blink with Teleportation Circle. So I think it's fine to run unless you're in just some hyper-aggressive strategy. But something to keep in mind with Sealed is that oftentimes you can't make aggressive decks work. You can't just be like, oh, I'm going to be so aggro, everything's a 2 or 3 drop, because you're just not going to have that many 2 or 3, you know, 1, 2, or 3 drops in your pool, right? You're going to have to be a little bit mid-rangey. So I think it's probably going to, you're probably going to put White Dragon in most of your white decks, especially in Sealed. Moving on to blue, we've got Secret Door, which costs 1 blue mana, has Defender, and is a 0/4. You can pay 5 mana to venture into the dungeon, activate only as a sorcery. So 5 mana to venture into a dungeon. I was just talking about how 3 mana and tapping a couple things probably isn't worth it to venture into a dungeon, and 5 mana definitely is too much for one venturer. So the idea would be that you slow the game down so much that, you know, you answer all your opponent's threats, and you're just sitting back activating this if you don't have to counter their stuff. You know, leave up counter spells. If they don't play anything you care about, you just activate this to get a little bit of value incrementally over and over again. But I don't think this is a very good card. I think being a 1-mana 0/4 is something to note, because if this was a 2-mana 0/4, if this was a 3-mana 0/4, it'd be a different story. Or if it was a even just like a 1 or 2-mana 0/3, it would be able to block a lot less. A 0/4 is a fairly good defensive body against an aggressive deck, or against an aggressive threat or two. You know, it keeps 3/1s at bay. It keeps cards like Loyal Warhound from beating you in the face for just 1 mana, and then eventually it can get you some value. But I think typically this is just not it. Unless you have a lot of reasons to care about Venture, or you just need some early way to interact, you just don't have any like early removal, and you just need a way to survive against aggressive decks, I would not be happy running Secret Door. I would avoid it if you could. We've also got Arcane Investigator. So this is a 2-mana 2/1. We can pay 6 to roll a d20. This is another big mechanic out of the set. Just like in Dungeons & Dragons, you roll a d20. If you roll, the higher you roll, the better. Again, like most of the time in Dungeons & Dragons, but not always. But most of the time in Dungeons & Dragons, you want to roll high with your dice, and specifically rolling a 20 is a crit, right? It's a nat 20. You get generally something really good happens, and rolling a 1, generally something really bad happens. Then the rest is sort of a range in between. You're trying to hit a certain threshold to do what you want to do. So some of the cards in this set reflect that. Some of them actually care about rolling 1s and 20s in particular, but a lot of them are just like Arcane Investigator, where low rolls are okay and higher rolls are pretty good. So Arcane Investigator, we pay 6 mana, and we either 1 through 9 draw a card, or 10 through 20 look at the top 3 cards of our library, put one of them into our hand and the rest in the bottom. So better than drawing a card, drawing the best out of our top 3 cards. So I think this is actually pretty good, especially if you have cards that just care about rolling d20s, of which there are some in the set. You know, there's cards where it doesn't even care about you rolling a good 20, right? It doesn't even care about having a high roll. It just says, when you roll a dice, do blank. And in those situations, I think Arcane Investigator is even better. I would say this is sort of what Secret Door wishes it was, right? Secret Door has this whole like mana sink, sit back during the games, you know, during a game state where things are really clogged. Secret Door can get you some extra value, but drawing a card is just so much better than, you know, venturing into a dungeon. And then when you roll high and you get to pick your top 3, that is just like miles beyond venturing into a dungeon. So unlike Secret Door, even though these two are kind of similar, you know, early in the game, there's sort of interaction. You know, Arcane Investigator, if you just need to trade this with an aggressive attacker, you can, right? You can just throw this out in front of a 3/1 and save your life. But later in the game, this is going to be an actual threat that your opponent's going to need to answer, or else you're just going to grind them out of the game. So quite good, and I'm quite happy to see we've got 2 of those. So if we do end up in blue, that's going to be nice. Moving on to Mordenkainen's Polywharf. So this is a 2-mana instant. Until end of turn, target creature becomes a dragon with base power and toughness 4/4 and gains flying. So effectively a combat trick, but only for small creatures. If we've already got our white dragon out, and our opponent has a blue dragon, which is a little bit bigger, it's a 5/5, we can't use this to win the combat, right? Because it's kind of capped at 4/4, and it becomes less of a good pump ability the better the creature is, right? If we use it on a 1/1, well, that's +3/+3, right? Seems kind of nice, but when we use it on a 2/3, it's only a +2/+1, and it gets worse as you go up. So I would say just probably don't want to run this unless there's some really weird situation where this pump spell looks quite good with some card in your pool. I would say this is pretty much unplayable. I would never put it in the deck, I don't think. Moving on, we've got You Come to a River, so another situation card, and we have 2 options. Our party can either fight the current or find a crossing. So Fight the Current allows us to return a non-land permanent to its owner's hand, and Find a Crossing says target creature gets +1/+0 and can't be blocked this turn. So both are good. One is obviously better than the other, which is Fight the Current. 2 mana bounce any non-land permanent back to its owner's hand is almost worth it on its own. Like, there are sets where I have happily played a card that was the whole effect, right? 2 mana instant speed bounce anything. It's pretty good, because a lot of times you can get a lot of good tempo value out of that. Bouncing your opponent's 5-drop or something can be really devastating, especially if you have like an aggressive blue deck. If you're on like blue-red and you're trying to play the tempo game, where you're trying to just keep your opponent off the board so you can get in some early damage and then like burn them out, that's pretty good. And then it has the additional Find a Crossing ability, which is better than it seems, because a big theme in blue and black in this set are creatures that, you know, care about dealing combat damage, that care about sneaking in and trying to hit your opponent directly and giving you some benefit from that. And also, it can just be a way to close out the game. You know, if you have your dragon sitting back, your opponent's at 5 life, you can make this unblockable, give it +1/+0, and hit him for 5, and just kill him kind of through a stalled board state. So that flexibility, being a pretty good, you know, interactive spell that is almost playable on its own, and adding on this additional ability that, especially if you build around it, is quite good. I think You Come to a River is a really good blue card and a nice one to have in our little pool here. Moving on to Scion of Stygia. So this is a 3-mana Tiefling Shaman, has Flash, and also has Cone of Cold, a D&D spell. And when it enters the battlefield, choose target creature an opponent controls, then roll a d20. 1 through 9, tap that creature. 10 through 20, tap that creature, and it doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step. So this is a little bit awkward because kind of 1 through 9 and 10 through 20 are almost very different cards. There's one deck where you would be happy no matter what, and that is, again, like I was talking about, sort of a tempo-y, kind of more aggressive blue deck where you're just trying to get your opponent's stuff out of the way so you can get in some damage, get in some attacks with creatures that care about dealing direct damage, you know, that sort of thing. Then you're always going to be happy with Scion of Stygia because you're probably going to play it like on your own turn or on your opponent's end step just to attack through and get some damage through. But otherwise, if you're like in a more controlling blue deck, you really want that 10 through 20 ability. Because in a controlling deck, if you flash it in like pre-combat to tap down their attacker, then it kind of loses the surprise value of them attacking in and you flashing it in as a blocker to eat their creature or to trade with a creature they wouldn't want to trade with. You know, they're kind of going to know what's up. So in a more defensive deck, you really want to get that doesn't untap during your controller's next untap step. So it's kind of a semi, you know, more impactful removal spell in that sense, at least temporarily. So I think this is kind of a weird one. I think given that you're in like something like the blue-black deck or a blue-red tempo deck, I think you'll be kind of happy with it, but I think in a lot of decks you actually won't be. Would be pretty good to blink with Teleportation Circle, though. Something to keep in mind. Moving on, we got Shortcut Seeker. This is a 4-mana 2/5, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, venture into a dungeon. This is pretty meh. I mean, there's a lot of cards like this in blue and black. There's a 3-mana one that draws you a card when you deal combat damage. That's a lot better than Shortcut Seeker. This is sort of the scuffed version of that. This is the version like, ah, crap, I didn't open the 3-mana one. Here's my crappy backup, right? Because 4-mana 2/5 are just not great stats. I mean, it's okay defensively, but you want to be attacking with this thing, right? You don't want to be playing defensively with this card. You want to get in and attack your opponent and start venturing. So 2/5 is hard to kill when it attacks, but it's easy to block, right? All they need is something with 3 toughness, and this can't get through. So you're going to have to find some way to sneak it through, but you're sneaking it through to venture into a dungeon, which isn't like a huge benefit. So all in all, I think this is probably bad. I think there's just better things to make unblockable in blue and black. But if you just need something, if you just the strategy has just kind of fallen apart, those are your colors, that's your strategy, but you don't have the good attack stuff, this is a backup, I guess. It's something. So moving on, we've got Aberrant Mind Sorcerer, which is a 5-mana 3/4. When it enters the battlefield, it's got psionic spells, so choose target instant or sorcery card in your graveyard and then roll a d20. 1 through 9, you may put that card on top of your library. 10 through 20, return it to your hand. So this kind of depends a little bit on your pool having some good instant sorceries to bring back. You know, doing something like putting You Come to a River on top of our deck is not really where we want to be because we basically take away our next draw step. You know, obviously if you roll a 10 through 20, that's a lot better. That's just free value. That's basically drawing an extra card and specifically an extra spell that we have, you know, we've already used, so hopefully it's pretty good, right? So, but really where I think this would shine is if you're in like blue-red or blue-black and you have a really good like removal spell or burn spell to close out the game, something where you're okay with it either going on top or back into your hand. If you specifically need the spell to go back into your hand to feel like it's worth it, otherwise it feels like you're missing out on a better draw, then you're probably not going to be super happy. But again, pretty good with Teleportation Circle. So if we did end up in blue-white, we do have some good, I think we have enough blinkable targets between blue and white to be happy with Teleportation Circle, but we don't have any blue rares, so we'll see if that ends up happening. Moving on, we have Rime Shield Frost Giant. So 5-mana 4/5 with Ward 3. If you don't know what Ward is, it's kind of like Hexproof if you're more familiar with that, except you can pay the extra ward cost to kind of turn it off, to get around the Hexproof ability. So when our opponent targets this with a removal spell, they have to pay an extra 3, which is actually a pretty big deal because this is a 4/5, right? They're not going to be able to kill it with like a 2-mana kill spell most of the time, like a little burn spell or something. They're going to need to target it with something that's generally like 4 or 5 mana to kill it, and then they have to pay an extra 3 on top of that, which is kind of brutal. On the other hand, it is just a 4/5. It doesn't really have any evasion or any extra good abilities. It's just a 4/5, so it's not like the best body ever, but it's a pretty good way to lock down the ground if we had some flyers. That's a pretty hard thing to get through. And in general, I think it's playable. I think I would be happy playing Rimeshield Frost Giant. And finally, we've got Split the Party in blue, which is 5 mana, choose target player, return half the creatures they control to their owner's hand, round it up. Really hard to evaluate card. I do love the flavor text, you know, just don't split the party, which is just a little bit of advice to DMs, I think, saying this is not a good idea, don't do this. You never want to split up the party, it just makes things harder, makes combat move at a snail's pace in D&D, you know, so not a good idea. But flavor aside, I would expect this to be bad. I would definitely, I don't know, I'd try it and see, maybe it surprises me. Maybe, you know, being able to bounce half your opponent's creatures, if you bounce a couple 5-drops, then who cares if you leave like a 1-drop and a 2-drop, right? But generally I would expect this isn't something like River's Rebuke, where it just clears the way to really kill your opponent. I would expect it just to be kind of meh. So I would say, I would expect it to be bad, but I'm open to the possibility that it's better, because it is semi-powerful. You can imagine board states where this would be a big deal, right? But moving on to black, we've got Ray of Enfeeblement. So something to keep in mind with this set is that it is kind of a core set, right? Even though it's Dungeons & Dragons, even though it's not like M21 or whatever, core set 2021, this has replaced a core set in the calendar. They did this instead of a core set. So to kind of get away with that, they put a lot of stuff that they would have put into a core set into this set as Dungeons & Dragons spells, like Ray of Enfeeblement, which is a spell from Dungeons & Dragons. So for 1 black mana, target creature gets -4/-1 until end of turn. If that creature is white, it gets -4/-4 until end of turn instead. So that's where the core set factors in, because they usually put a lot of specific color hate in core sets. It's sort of safety valves. You know, if white is just too good in the format, if white is dominating play, well, having a 1-mana kill spell against pretty much every white creature is going to kind of put a cork on that. It's going to limit how bad things can get, right? But in limited, I do think this is quite good. I think 1 mana, -4/-1 is pretty situational, but isn't bad. Like, there's -4/-1 means it's just going to kill anything with 1 toughness. This is 1 mana kill anything with 1 toughness, which is actually, you know, a pretty decent number of cards in this set. It's not nothing, and it can really mess up combat. So -4/-1 for 1 mana is actually kind of a lot. That's, like I was talking about before with combat tricks, 3 mana, you really got to be like, something really big is happening for this to be worth it at a combat trick at 3 mana, but a 1 mana can get away, 1 mana combat tricks can get away with a lot more, right? It's okay that this isn't like mind-breakingly busted, you know, -4/-1, because you're paying 1 black mana for it. That's almost nothing, right? So being able to kind of sneak this in and still be able to play the rest of the cards your turn is pretty nice, and it's pretty easy to sneak into a combat. Even if you have like another counter spell during that same combat, you can usually sneak this in for 1 mana. And then, of course, against any white deck, it's just kind of like the best card ever. 1 mana kill almost anything. It kills a freaking white dragon, a 6 mana card that your opponent's like, yeah, this is my finisher, time to die, and you kill it for 1 mana. It's just going to crush them, right? It's going to destroy their dreams. So I think Ray of Enfeeblement is fantastic. Good reason to be in black. Alright, here's a class card. So I talked about this earlier, and these are really big deals in this format. They are very powerful, very devastating cards, and particularly I found Warlock class to be pretty good for out of the uncommon ones. There's ones at rare as well that are generally powerful, but out of the uncommon ones, Warlock class is up there with the best. So the way these class cards work is they start out at level 1, right? So we pay the 1 black mana for Warlock class, and we just have that top ability there of at the beginning of your end step, if a creature died this turn, each opponent loses 1 life. So that's good in an aggressive deck, but typically not something you would pay a whole card for. But it has additional level up ability. So at sorcery speed during our turn, you know, when we could have cast a creature or whatever, at that same sort of timing, we can pay 2 mana, so 1 and a black, and when it becomes Prerelease level 2, we get to look at the top 3 cards of our library, put one of them into our hand and the rest into our graveyard, so a little bit of card selection is pretty close to draw a card, which means this replaces itself. So there's a very low opportunity cost and gives us some card selection even. And then the really powerful ability is the last one here, 7 mana, level 3. At the beginning of your end step, each opponent loses life equal to the life they lost this turn. So if you're ahead on board at all, if you're able to deal any damage to your opponent, this is just a really effective way to close out the game. You're at like 10 life, you know, you feel like you've stabilized. They only have to deal 5 more damage to you. You know, it doesn't even have to be all at once. This is forever. You know, if they burn you with something like Vampire Spawn, which we'll talk about in a little bit, they make you lose 2 life. That's 4 life. You know, they're going to be just killing you so quick with this just having this activated ability out there, and they don't have to pay that 7 mana until they're, you know, until they're ready to do that, right? It's just always sitting out there, always an option. Kind of the threat of activation is always there. So something to worry about for sure, and a reason why a card like Dawnbreaker Cleric I think is actually a lot better than in this set than it would typically be, because you just need a way to deal with these things. Like, they are really problems. And Warlock class, it's nice that we've got 2 of them actually, which is really nice. So a really good reason to be in black, and specifically like in an aggressive black deck, I think. Moving on, we've got Deadly Dispute. So this is 2 mana. As an additional cost to cast a spell, sacrifice an artifact or a creature, draw 2 cards, and then create a treasure token. So kind of rebates back half its cost, gives us a treasure token. So it, you know, we needed 2 mana to cast it, but then it gives us 1 back, so it kind of only costed 1 mana, or gives us some ramp for the following turn. And typically these effects, you kind of need a little bit more to make them worth it. Village Rites being the exception, where Village Rites was 1 mana for this effect. It didn't give you a treasure, but to sacrifice a creature and draw 2 cards. And that kind of seemed like it was worth it in most black decks, because in limited, because it was just so versatile. You know, sneaking in 1 mana is just so simple. It's the same sort of logic as Ray of Enfeeblement, where you can just sneak that in so easily. It really doesn't take up a turn. But 2 mana is a little bit more clunky, right? It's a little bit harder to have this up and say, okay, I'm going to leave this up. If my opponent tries to remove any of my creatures, I can sacrifice them in response and draw 2 cards. That's all well and good, but if they don't, and you're stuck just, you know, you kind of have to use this anyway, right? You can't afford to leave 2 mana up forever, so you're just sacking a creature or an artifact just to sack it and draw a couple cards, which sometimes isn't as good, right? You really want to kind of blow out an opponent's removal spell to be really happy with this. But all that said, again, an important thing to remember about black and red in this set is that they do create a lot of treasure tokens. That's their whole like sub-theme of black and red, is creating treasure tokens. And treasure tokens are artifacts, so these Deadly Disputes kind of fuel themselves in a way. Like, we can Deadly Dispute the first time, sacrifice a treasure we made with something else, this makes a treasure, and then with our second Deadly Dispute, because we do have 2, we can sacrifice the treasure we made with the first Deadly Dispute to draw 2 cards. So it kind of is like we can turn tokens into real cards, which is pretty powerful. So Deadly Dispute, I think, and red black in particular, I think it's quite good. And other color combinations of black, I think, is probably worse. But yeah, it's not terrible in any context. Moving on to Fate's Reversal. This is a 2 mana sorcery that lets us return 1 target creature card from our graveyard to our hand, and then we get to venture into a dungeon. So typically these effects have been pretty meh. These sort of recursion effects, using a whole card to return 1 creature back to your hand. When they've done it where these return a couple creatures, then it becomes a little bit more palatable. But you kind of need the field to already kind of be set up, right? You need something already in the graveyard for Fate's Reversal to even do anything, right? And then all it's doing is kind of like drawing you a creature of your choice from your graveyard, so it's better than just a regular card draw, but it is just sort of replacing itself, right? And you kind of already need to be in a position where that's good. There can be like, imagine we draw our opening hand, we have a couple Deadly Disputes and a Fate's Reversal. We'd much rather this be any creature, right? Any creature at all, rather than some sort of recursion effect. But it does have that little additional upside of venturing into a dungeon, so if we're in like black-white and we care about venturing a little bit more than we usually would, because that's one of the main themes of the black-white deck, then maybe this becomes a little bit better. But in general, I would stay away from this, I think, unless there's just maybe some bomb that you feel like you need to win the game, and having a way to get that back really helps your deck, maybe. But I would just stay away from it, I think. And I think in general it's going to be pretty mediocre to bad. Moving on, we've got Horde Robber. So this is what I was talking about with the blue-black sneaky deck, where you want to get in some damage and benefit from that. This is black's like marquee card of that archetype. So this is 2 mana, 1/3. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, we create a treasure token. So nice, right? It's not nearly as good as the blue common that lets us draw a card when it deals damage, but that's 3 mana, this is 2 mana, and that difference is a pretty big deal, right? It's pretty realistic. It'll happen pretty often that we go first. On turn 1 we play a land, turn 2 we play our Horde Robber, our opponent goes to their turn 2, and maybe they just don't have a blocker by then. Maybe the only creature they have has 1 toughness, or they don't have a creature at all, and this Horde Robber gets in at least 1 attack before they get to their turn 3 and play a blocker. And in those situations, we get a free treasure, we get to ramp ourselves, we maybe get some color fixing, which is pretty important with treasures. If we have a treasure-focused deck, it makes it a little bit easier to splash a 3rd color, potentially, so getting in that extra hit can be a pretty big deal. So, something to keep in mind with Horde Robber. And then, if we do find a way to make it unblockable repeatedly, there's some equipment and such that makes them unblockable. Thieves Tool, which we'll talk about in a bit. If we slap that on a Horde Robber so it's repeatedly being able to hit our opponent unabated, then it'll be pretty good, right? It's just generating us ramp and mana fixing repeatedly, making any sort of mana sinks we have really good. So, Horde Robber, I think, a little bit of a build around, a little bit, you kind of would like to benefit from some unblockable, but I think it's also borderline playable on its own. If you just have like enough removal to back it up, being able to get in with this once or twice a game is going to be pretty good too. So moving on to our next spell, which is very nice to see in our pool here, an uncommon removal spell, Power Word Kill. So 2 mana, instant speed, destroy target creature as long as it's not an angel, it's not a demon, it's not a devil, and it's not a dragon. So this is a fairly significant miss, right? If our opponent plays their white dragon, like I've been talking about this entire video, as their finisher, we're going to hate the fact that we've only got Power Word Kill in our hand, and we're going to lose to this dumb thing. But it does hit most creatures, right? It hits something like, in this set, it probably hits, 85% of creatures or something like that. And being a 2-mana kill spell for most of the set, it's good enough, right? It's still quite a good removal spell, so we're pretty happy to see this in our pool. Definitely play it in every black deck ever. You're going to be always happy with this card. So moving on, we got Thieves Tools. We just talked about this with Horde Robber, but it's a 2-mana artifact equipment. When it enters the battlefield, you make a treasure token, so that's nice. It gives you a little bit of something, even if you don't have anything else going on. It maybe ramps you into your threat that you can stick this on. But its ability is the equipped creature can't be blocked as long as its power is 3 or less, and then it has equip 2. So this is pretty good. I mean, you have to be specifically in the archetype, I think, that cares about this unblockability for it to be very good, but it is a way to break board states. So I think it is a build around, right? I don't think you'll just slap this in every single black deck, but assuming you have enough targets for this to be worth it, I don't think you specifically need to be in blue-black either, right? If you're in red-black and you play, and you have just, something like 7, 8, 9 targets to slap this on, I think you're still going to be happy with it. So, yeah, Thieves Tool, pretty good and pretty important for that blue-black deck. Precipitous Drop, this is a 3-mana enchantment aura, enchant creature. When it enters the battlefield, venture into the dungeon, and enchanted creature gets -2/-2, it gets -5/-5 instead as long as you completed a dungeon. So I think this is a pretty okay removal spell. Not great, but okay. 3 mana, give something -2/-2 is going to get rid of, aggressive threats, and you can even slap this onto a bigger threat, a 4/4 or a 5/5, and just knock it down to a 1/1 or a 2/2, with the understanding that, one, that kind of makes it much less of a threat, and then eventually, if your deck is focused around it, you'll eventually finish a dungeon, and even if this was only a -2/-2 when you casted it, when you finish that dungeon, it'll buff itself up to a -5/-5 and kill that creature. So this would be something that's better in that black-white deck, that deck that's really focused around just like finishing dungeons, going through the Tomb of Annihilation and really just trying to finish a dungeon as fast as possible. This is one of those cards that really benefits from that. So I think it's playable in pretty much any black deck. I'd be fine putting this in. Just a 3-mana aura that gives something -2/-2, even if you never get to the -5/-5, with a little additional benefit of venturing into a dungeon, is still, I think, good enough to see play. But you're definitely gonna, if you have some additional venturing built into your deck, it's obviously going to be way better. Especially if you're hardcore built around it. And moving on to Vampire Spawn, I think this is secretly a pretty damn good card. So this is a 3-mana 2/3. When it enters the battlefield, each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. So 3 mana 2/3 is a pretty meh body, and just your opponent losing 2 life and you gaining 2 life is a pretty meh effect. But together, I think this is actually a really solid, sort of like bread and butter card. Vampire Spawn is great because it's flexible. It's great if you're up against an aggressive opponent. It's a great way to stabilize, right? You play this, you gain a little bit of life back, which can be really crucial. Or if you're the aggressor, if you're attacking, having a little burn attached to another attacking body is pretty nice. It comes into play and it drains your opponent for 2. So it's absolutely crucial here that it does both, because that turns us into a card that's good in one kind of deck into a card that's good in, I think, pretty much every black deck. So the fact that we have 2 of these is really nice. Definitely have a lot of draws towards black. This is a good sort of like bread and butter, solid core to our deck to have these couple of vampire spawns. So pretty happy about that. Gelatinous Cube, so this is we already talked about this actually. About to start to go into a whole spiel about Gelatinous Cube again, but you know what it does. It's good. Mana Core, so this is like a terrible Gelatinous Cube, but no, it's a pretty good card. So 4 mana, 2/1 flyer. It also has flash, so you can flash it in at instant speed. And it also has tail spikes, which is when it enters the battlefield, destroy target creature an opponent controls that was dealt damage this turn. So black has been getting these effects over the last few sets, and they've always been pretty good, right? This one's attached to a flyer, which is even better than some of the previous ones we saw that were playable even without this extra evasion on it. But I think a 2/1 flash flyer for 4 is pretty decent. It's a good way to finish out the game, a good little aggressive flyer. But of course, you really want to get that enter the battlefield ability to go off. You really want to attack in with, like, let's say you attack in with your Horde Robber, right? And your opponent has a 2/2. Well, they're going to throw the 2/2 in front of it because they don't want you to get a treasure token. They bounce off each other, but then you play your Manticore, that creature dies, and you basically enter the battlefield, kill the creature, sort of like Gelatinous Cube, and then you're left behind with a pretty good attacking body. And you can even do, even if your opponent has like a 4/4 or something, you can attack him with your Horde Robber, and they probably know it's coming, right? They probably, if they've played the set a bit, they're probably going to say, alright, I know I'm about to get Manticore, but do I really want him to be able to just attack in over and over and over again, generating treasures? I gotta block, right? I can't just not block, so Manticore is a great sort of, even if you don't have it, you can bluff. Pretty risky bluff, but you can bluff that you have it, and maybe they let your Horde Robber through even when they shouldn't, right? So something to keep in mind is it does have, the fact that it's in the set makes, you can in desperate situations, you can do like a bluff attack. But yeah, in general, definitely a playable card. Moving on, we've got Drider. So this is another card that's pretty nice to make unblockable, which is a 5 mana 4/3. It has reach, so a nice way to interact with flyers, and when it deals combat damage to a player, create a 2/1 black spider creature token with menace and reach. So really powerful, of course. If it hits even one time, that is more than worth it for 5 mana. But it does have one major downside. Thieves Tools does not work with this card, right? The blue-black cards that typically care about dealing damage are all at 3 power or below because they work with Thieves Tools. But this is sort of the exception, right? Drider really wants to deal combat damage at least one time. But it kind of, you have to do like a one-shot unblockable ability, something like you come to a river. To get it through, because it's just not going to work with Thieves Tools. So that said, it's an okay defensive body. A 4/3 is probably going to trade with whatever it's blocking, especially a flyer. So it is, I mean, it's not a bad fail case. 4/3 reach is okay. It's not a good long-term defense because it is probably going to die by blocking, but it does allow you to trade with the ever-present white dragon. So something to keep in mind. Moving on to Zombie Ogre. 5 mana, 3/5. At the beginning of your end step, if a creature died this turn, venture into the dungeon. So this is the black-green strategy. This is, even though this is a mono-black card, really it shines in the black-green deck where they have a lot of sacrifice effects. They have a lot of cards that care about creatures dying. So this is probably playable in other decks, but I would be, you know, I wouldn't be super happy about playing it outside of the black-green deck where we have a lot of stuff that either facilitates creatures dying from sacrificing or forcing blocks, or, you know, making Death Touchers fight with other creatures. But a 3/5 body isn't nothing. It's an okay defensive body. It can kind of lock things down pretty well. And then if you do get some additional value out of it, it's pretty nice. But typically I'd put this in a green-black deck and not be too happy about it otherwise. And then moving on to our last black card, we have Baleful Beholder. So this is a 6 mana 6/5. When it enters the battlefield, choose 1. Each opponent sacrifices an enchantment that's the anti-magic cone. And then it also has Fear Ray. Creatures you control gain menace until the end of turn. So 6 mana is a lot, right? This doesn't have any evasion. It's not quite as good a finisher as something like White Dragon, my favorite card that I will always talk about at every opportunity. But it doesn't really have that same finishing power. What it does bring to the table is if you already have an established board, right? White Dragon and cards like it are kind of just good by themselves, right? You don't really need much of a setup to be happy with a 4/4 flyer smacking your opponent in the face. But this is a little bit more, right? 6 mana, 6/5, easy to chump, easy to stay alive against. And 6/5 instead of 6/6 means that it's a little bit easier to like double block and deal with, so your opponent doesn't just lose to it as much as it might like a big beefy, 7/7 or something. So it's not quite as powerful a finisher, but if you do have a big board, if you've got a board full of vampire spawns and horde robbers and driders, and being able to kind of play this as your last card, your top-end card, you've got your 4 or 5 creatures, and then you just give everything menace, you can get in for a big chunk of damage, but I think it's probably going to be bad. You probably only want to run 1, and even then, if you can avoid running that 1, you'd probably be happier not running it. So I'm going to say it's probably not a great card. So a little bit of a stinker to finish out black on, but in general, black seems pretty good. We've got mana cores, cubes, spawns, horde robbers, and even Thieves Tool potentially, power word kill, so, and a couple of warlocks classes, so a lot of good stuff in black. But let's move on to red. Boots of Speed, 1 red mana, equipped creature gets +1/+0 and has haste and has equipped 1. I think this is better than it looks. I don't think I don't think you need to be in an equipment deck for this to shine, although obviously it's a lot better there. But I think you could play this in like red-black, because the equip cost is so low. You're basically adding an additional mana onto any of your creatures to give them haste, which a lot of time you're going to have, right? A lot of time you're not playing perfectly on curve. You're not playing your vampire spawns always on turn 3. Sometimes you play them on turn 4, and being able to make these a 3/3, that a little attack boost is pretty important too, or make your mana core a 3/1 that's going to be an even more aggressive attacker. I think that's actually pretty good. So I think you either want to be really aggressive or care about artifacts / equipment, but assuming you satisfy either one of those, I think Boots of Speed is actually more playable than it might look at first. Kick in the Door, so this is a 1 mana sorcery, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature. That creature gains haste till end of turn and can't be blocked by walls this turn, and then venture to a dungeon. Don't think this is really worth it. It does a lot for 1 mana, right, but it is at sorcery speed. It kind of gives the same idea as mana core. You can imagine, okay, playing this, blow up my opponent's creature, play Kick in the Door, I get to make it a 3/2 with haste that's tacking in, I get a venture on top of that, but I think it's not quite as resilient as Boots of Speed, where you can get that effect over and over and over again for 1 mana. It's just, I don't think it, despite everything it does, I don't think what it does is actually good enough to be worth a card. Maybe I'm wrong, because it is a lot of text on a 1 mana card, but I would expect, I wouldn't put this in my deck, I don't think. Brazen Dwarf, 2 mana 1/3 Dwarf Shaman. When you roll 1 or more dice, Brazen Dwarf deals 1 damage to each opponent. So this is what I was talking about back when we were talking about Arcane Investigator, where 6 mana to roll a dice is just having that repeated ability sometimes can be a payoff in itself, right? Even if you're rolling like crap, even if you roll 1 every time, you have Brazen Dwarf here that's just pinging your opponent over and over and over again, a good way to finish out the game as you're also getting additional advantage. I think it obviously fits best in the blue-red deck where, rolling dice is sort of the name of the game, but it probably is also fine in a blue-black deck, or a red-black deck, assuming you have enough dice rolling, which doesn't look like we really do in black. But I think in any deck with like repeatable dice rolling mana sinks, it's going to be pretty good. Moving on to Dragon's Fire, great removal spell, 2 mana. It's got a ton of text on it, but effectively what it does is 3 damage to target creature, planeswalker, and then if you have a dragon, a white dragon perhaps, you can, instead of 3 damage, you can use its power to do that much damage instead. So if you got a dragon on the battlefield, you got a dragon in your hand, either way you can point to the dragon and say, okay, my dragon has 5 power, so this does 5 damage instead, which is a nice little additional upside, because this is just a good card, right? It's not like it needs that, right? It's not like it's a crappy overcosted card unless you satisfy this special condition. No, just a 3 mana, 3 damage to target creature, planeswalker. It's good, right? Run that in every deck ever. So pretty happy to have that in our pool for sure. Goblin Morningstar. So an uncommon equipment, 2 mana, equipped creature gets +1/+0 and has trample, and it has equip cost of 2. Okay. And then when it enters the battlefield, you roll a d20. 1 through 9, you make a 1/1. 10 through 20, you make a 1/1, and then equip Goblin Morningstar to it. So you either get a 1/1 plus an equipment, or a 2/1 with the equipment attached to it. So I think you'll want to be a certain deck to want to run this. I don't think this is actually that good in a vacuum. You want a deck that can take advantage of the trample, right? That's the big thing this gives. +1/+0 for equip 2 is absolutely not worth it. And even just +1/+0 with trample, if you just have like a regular deck, if you're just throwing that on your Brazen Dwarf, who cares that it gives you trample, right? But if you're in some big beefy boy deck, if you're in like red-green, if you have a lot of like 4/4s or 5/5s, or even like big giants with like 7 power, of which there are in green, then it gets a lot better, right? I think this is sort of a build-around card. It's never going to be terrible, right? You always get a 1/1 body out of it, so it's not like, there is some risk to equipment like Thieves Tools, for example. If you just don't have any creatures left, if your opponent's just removal spell, and you're just out of creatures, then Thieves Tool does nothing, right? And Goblin Morningstar is never going to be in that situation, but it gives you a 1/1, right? It's not like it gives you something great. So I think you really do have to care about that trample for this to be a great card. Or if you care about the dice rolling, if you're in that blue-red dice rolling deck, it does get a little bit better there too. Moving on to Hobgoblin Captain. Speaking about cards that benefit from trample, this is a 2 mana 3/1. Whenever it attacks, okay, it has pack tactics. So like I was talking about before with the the ability words, cards like Gelatinous Cube that have these italicized words that you don't have to remember. This is not that. Pack Tactics is actually like a conventional ability word, just like every other ability word ever in the history of Magic, where it shows up on a lot of cards in the set. It's a real mechanic. And what this does is, whenever it attacks, if you attacked with creatures with total power 6 or greater, which is what Pack Tactics is, Hobgoblin Captain gains first strike until end of turn. So if you attack with 2 of these, for example, both of them are going to get first strike because you attacked with 3 power and 3 power, that makes 6. If you attack with this in 3 1/1s, or if you attack with this in a 7/7, then you're going to be way over, right? So it just matters that all the attacking creatures' power adds up to 6 or more. And assuming it does, this is a pretty good card, right? It's sort of like the situation I talked about with Horde Robber, where you can imagine playing this on turn 2, hitting your opponent once, and that's a pretty big chunk of life. And then later in the game, once your opponent has some blockers, has some 1/1s out there where Hobgoblin Captain kind of isn't so great anymore because it's just going to trade with some little dorky 1/1 token or something. Well, now it can give itself first strike, which means it's not going to trade with a little dorky nothing. And it's going to take at least 4 toughness worth of blockers for this thing to actually die, right? Otherwise, it's just going to be pseudo unblockable. Your opponent doesn't want to trade something good for it, right? And it sets up great situations where we're attacking it with this with the first strike. Our opponent's like, fine, I'll throw a couple 2/2s in front of it just to finally kill the thing. And then we're able to blow up something like Power Word kill something on the spot, and then they just lose both their blockers, and we get to keep our Hobgoblin Captain. So it's just a pretty powerful attacker is what it comes down to, a pretty good aggressive threat. So moving on, we've got You Find Some Prisoners, so another situation card. So we find a couple prisoners, and our options are either A, break their chains, or B, interrogate them. So one thing to point out about this card that I thought was pretty cool is on all the You Blank a Blank situation cards, it's the same party. It's the same D&D party. You can see here that the lizard person and the mage are talking about freeing these two in the jail cell. And if we look back at like we look at, you get ambushed on the road, you can see the same dragon person, the same wizard, and those people they freed from the jail cell, they're along with them, they've joined the party now. So this is sort of the start to the adventure here with You Find Some Prisoners. So break the chains means we destroy target artifact. Interrogate them, we exile the top 3 cards of their library, choose one of them until the end of the turn. You may play that card and spend mana as though it were any color to cast it. I think this is fine. I think this is actually a good card because it gives you some of that incidental artifact and enchantment hate I was talking about earlier, which is nice to have, especially in Best of 1 Sealed, where we can't even bring in answers out of the sideboard. Having some way main deck to deal with artifacts or enchantments is really nice. And then interrogate them is probably what we're going to be doing most of the time, right? And it's sort of a never-fail ability, right? Because we don't have to do it this turn. It's not like we interrogate them and we also have to have the mana left over to cast whatever we hit, because we're able to cast it until the end of our next turn. Importantly, this lets us play the card. It's not just cast the card. So this lets us hit land drops weirdly out of our opponent's deck, right? If we only have 2 lands, we're like, we need to really make sure we hit our land. We can interrogate some prisoners, hit like an off-color land out of our opponent's deck, and play that, and then we're going to hit our 3rd land drop. So it's sort of a way to either ensure that we have action or land drops, whatever we need. It's just kind of weird that it's coming out of our opponent's deck, right? That's the kind of weird spin on it, but either way, this is pretty good, I think. This is definitely a playable card that you want to put in pretty much every red deck. I don't imagine you'll ever be cutting this card. Price of Loyalty, 3 mana, sorcery, gain control of target creature until end of turn. Untap that creature. It gains haste until end of turn. If mana from a treasure was spent to cast this spell, that creature gets +2/+0 until end of turn. So there's one of these in pretty much every set. Any set that sacrificing is somewhere in the set, they usually put one of these temporary steal effects, and that's typically where you'll want to play them, right? If you have a lot of sacrifice effects, if you have like 4 or 5 cards in your deck that let you sacrifice a creature, then using Price of Loyalty to steal your opponent's creature temporarily, hit them with it, and then sacrifice it to your effect for some benefit, that's pretty nice. That's a pretty good payoff. And virtually every other situation, you don't want to be playing this card. It's just not worth it. 3 mana to temporarily steal a creature. You have to be the most aggressive deck to ever be on the face of the planet to be happy with spending a whole card and 3 mana on that. And even if you are that deck, you're not that deck in Sealed, right? Like I was talking about before, just building a hardcore, aggressive Sealed deck is just difficult. It's only going to happen once in a blue moon. You're typically going to be pretty mid-rangey, even in your aggressive decks. And so Price of Loyalty just doesn't really have a place in Sealed. If you somehow wind up with a bunch of sacrifice effects, then give it a shot. But I would say you're probably just better off never putting this card in your deck. But it does showcase that the sort of treasure theme I was talking about with red and black, where it gets an additional benefit if it was cast with a treasure, and a lot of the red and black cards do have that. We didn't really see many black cards like that, but it is a theme in the 2 colors. Valor Singer, so this is a 3 mana 2/3. It has combat inspiration because it's a bard. It sings a little song. But what it does is, at the beginning of combat on your turn, target creature you control gets +1/+0 until end of turn, and it can be itself. So effectively what that says is, during your opponent's turn, this is a 2/3. During your own turn, this is a 3/3. Or you can splash that around a little bit. You know, if you have a 2-drop, if you played your Hobgoblin Captain on turn 2 and played this on turn 3, it kind of gives you a hasty point of damage that you can put on another creature. Or, you know, later in the game, if your opponent has a mighty white dragon per se, and you have a 3-power attacker, they would normally be able to just block that for free, but now you're able to boost that up to a 4-power attacker, and they're going to have to choose to block, make a mediocre block, just to not take that damage. So I do think Valor Singer is pretty good. All that to say, I think this is definitely a solid playable card for sure, but pretty much be always happy running Valor Singer. It's never going to be amazing, but I think it's going to mess things up enough for your opponent to be pretty good. Zorn, we already talked about that. Great card. Hoarding Ogre, so this is a treasure producer for the red-black archetype. So 4 mana, 3/3, not great body, but when it attacks you, roll a d20. You either make a treasure token, make 2 treasure tokens, or 3 treasure tokens if you get a natural 20. So if you get that crit, that nat 20, you actually get the 3 treasure tokens, which is a lot, I mean, for 1 attack. It does come at the price of this being a pretty mediocre body. A 4 mana 3/3 is going to get outclassed by most other 4-drops. Sometimes this just won't be able to attack without dying. So you really got to care about those treasures, I think. Either have something to ramp into, like our red-black demon, or just have a lot of things that care about the treasures, because otherwise, you know, you're just not going to be happy with this body, and that's sort of what you're getting the most out of this card. So it is nice with Zorn. It is a repeatable way to make treasures, which is nice with Zorn. We attack with it even if we roll a 1 and make 1 treasure token instead we're going to make 2, you know, so that's pretty sweet. So it does have some additional upside there with our particular rare, But in general, it's going to be a pretty niche card, I think. Unexpected Windfall, so this is a 4-mana instant. As an additional cost of the spell, discard a card, draw 2 cards, make 2 treasure. Again, I think you're going to want to be in a treasure-focused deck to particularly care about this card. And even then, it's pretty meh, right? You're spending 4 mana to do effectively nothing, right, besides make 2 treasures. You're just kind of shuffling some cards around, and more limited Magic is about getting on the board, affecting the board, putting a blocker out there, putting an attacker out there, doing something to affect the board as you're going, because you don't really need to spend time generating card advantage outside of the board nowadays. You have a lot of things that just do stuff in addition, right? You have a lot of creatures with additional abilities that aren't just creatures but are basically spells too, right? So being able to actually affect the board with creatures or other permanents, or doing something, you know, having a removal spell that removes a permanent from the board, some way affecting the board, is pretty important in Modern Magic. So I would probably just go on the side of not running Unexpected Windfall. It being an instant is nice, so you can leave up like removal spells or counter spells, and then Unexpected Windfall if your opponent doesn't play anything you want to remove, so it does have that additional benefit. But even then, I would lean towards not playing Unexpected Windfall unless you have a deck that really cares about those treasures and or ramp. It is one thing about this art is he is pulling a card out of a deck of many things, which is one of the coolest cards in D&D, or one of the coolest items in D&D. Basically makes all your dreams come true or kills you. So depends on which card you draw. And there's actually a card in the set for the deck of many things. So look that up if you feel like it. But anyway, Fairness Fireball, 5 mana instant, deals 5 damage to target creature planeswalker. So first and foremost, without even reading the rest of the card, definitely worth it. So 5 mana to effectively kill most creatures is going to be definitely playable. The planeswalker thing is whatever. You're going to see a planeswalker once in a blue moon, but 5 mana kill most creatures, not all creatures, but most creatures, is definitely worth it in both an aggressive deck and a more controlling deck. But it goes on to say roll a d20, 1 through 9 deals 2 damage to each player, 10 through 20 deals 2 damage to each opponent. So effectively this makes Fairness Fireball a better card in aggressive decks than controlling decks, right? If you're sitting back in a controlling deck trying to stabilize, trying not to die to your more aggressive opponent, and you roll a 1 through 9, that's actually pretty bad, right? 5 mana to kill their thing and take 2 damage can mean that you die. Can mean that you don't stabilize, that you have just low enough life that you're going to die to the little dorks before you can stabilize. But if you're the aggressor yourself, if you're the person attacking in, then you don't care, right? 1 through 9 and 10 through 20, it doesn't really matter because you're the one smashing your opponent in the face. If you take 2 damage too, who gives a shit? Your opponent's going to die before you are. So I would say Fairness Fireball, pretty damn nice in an aggressive deck. And still playable in a control deck, although not ideal, of course. So if you've got better options, maybe play those, but you're probably going to play at least one in pretty much every red deck. Swarming Goblins, so this is a 5 mana 4/3. When it enters the battlefield, roll a d20. 1 through 9 make 1 goblin, 10 through 19 make 2 goblins, 20 make 3 goblins. So you know, if you look at it base, if we just say, what if we always rolled a 1 through 9, it's pretty meh, right? A 5 mana for basically 5/4 worth of stats split up between 2 bodies, that's not bad, especially because a 4/3 probably is going to trade for whatever it's attacking in with, but it's not amazing. But if you get either of the other 2 modes, I think that's actually a pretty good deal for a common, you know. 5 mana getting 2 tokens in a 4/3, or God forbid 3 tokens in a 4/3, I think you're going to be really happy with that in either case. And especially I think it's quite good in the red-white deck, where each of those bodies is going to be something you can put an equipment on. You know, you can slap all your equipments on the 4/3, attacking with that, they're going to have to trade something pretty significant to trade with that, and then once it's dead, you can put the equipment all on one of your other 1/1s and attack with that, and if you made multiple 1/1s, you can just keep doing it. So the additional bodies are really helpful in the red-white deck in particular, but I also think it's probably a playable card in most color combinations. So moving on to green, we've got first and foremost Neverwinter Dryad, which I think is actually a pretty decent budget ramp option in EDH, is primarily where I know this from, but it costs 1 green mana, you pay 2 mana to sacrifice it, search your library for a basic forest card, and put it onto the battlefield, and then shuffle. So, kind of a rampant growth. You know, you play this on turn 1, turn 2, you pay 2 mana to sacrifice it. You can do something kind of tricky, like put this in front of your opponent's attacker, put it in front of their swarming goblins, and when it's blocking swarming goblins, you can then pay 2 mana before the damage actually happens to sacrifice it to basically fizzle their attack, so you can get some additional tricky benefit from that. It isn't quite a rampant growth in the sense that it's never going to fix your mana, right? This only goes and gets a basic forest, so it's effectively just ramp, right? Unless you're missing that second double green, like with you meet in a tavern, like you need 2 green and you're missing your second green source, then I guess it's mana fixing, but, you know, 90% of the time this is just going to be strictly ramping, getting you from, you know, 2 mana to 4 mana, 3 mana to 5 mana, getting you somewhere a turn early, but it's not going to actually fix you in the same way that a rampant growth would. But I do think that's enough to make this playable, especially in the green-black deck, because in the green-black deck, this is basically a death trigger that you can trigger on command. You know, there's a lot of... That whole archetype is about carrying when creatures die, giving you +1/+1 counters or something when creatures die. So having a way to trigger that on demand with a creature that can sacrifice itself, that's already kind of good regardless of that synergy, I think makes Neverwinter Dryad quite good. Moving on, we got Null Hunter. So Null Hunter is a 2-mana 2/2 with Pack Tactics. So again, Pack Tactics is an actual ability that would be good to learn, but what it is whenever Null Hunter attacks, if you attacked with creatures with total power 6 or greater this combat, put a +1/+1 counter on Null Hunter. So this can kind of snowball, right? This is not much on its own, but it's also not nothing on its own. A 2-mana 2/2, even in Modern Magic, is still something, and this threatens to be a problem if your opponent doesn't deal with it. If your opponent misses a turn or two and lets this get a counter on it, even like 1 time or 2 times, they're gonna have to end up trading some significant resource with this. And so it kind of grows beyond its 2/2 kind of role filler status. I think in the later game. So I think you'll be happy to play Null Hunter in effectively any green deck. It's going to be better in an aggressive deck, of course, or a deck with big beefy creatures where you can pretty much always trigger it, but I think even defensively it's not terrible. A 2-mana 2/2 still is a decent body in Modern Magic. Moving on to Prosperous Innkeeper, this is a 2-mana 1/1, so a little bit less good of a body baseline, but when it enters the battlefield you make a treasure token, and whenever another creature enters the battlefield under your control you gain 1 life. So I think this is pretty good. I think it basically ramps you, you know, it's a one-shot ramp with treasure, but it ramps you in a way that fixes any color, right? If you're just stuck on all forests and you desperately need your second color, this gives you a way that you can at least cast 1 card. You can at least cast your blue card draw spell to go and get, you know, try to find other lands or whatever. So it gives you a little bit of not only ramp, but gives you a way out of some bad hands, but it also has an incidental life gain attached to it, which is pretty nice. You know, it's pretty nice to be able to just incidentally, your opponent is not going to want to kill this thing, right? It's a little 1/1 dork that doesn't do much of anything, so it's probably going to just stick out on the battlefield, gain you, you know, 4, 5, 6 life over the course of the turn, and all that for 2 mana is pretty nice. And of course, it's fantastic in the green-white life gain deck, and there it's just going to be one of the best cards in your deck to be able to repeatedly trigger life gain. I don't think we really had much of the pieces in white for the green-white life gain deck, but that is the strategy of green-white in this format, is to gain life, and having a way to repeatedly do that every time you play a creature is probably going to be just busted in the green-white deck. Scaled Herbalist, we have a 2-mana 1/3 Lizard Druid that can tap itself to put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. I think this is bad. I think this is actually a bad card. It's just hard to repeatedly do this. So we've seen cards similar to this in Constructed that have seen some play, right? But the difference between Constructed and Sealed is that you're not going to be able to draw a million cards consistently, and just that ability to play an extra land is so beneficial when you know you're drawing like 3 cards every turn like you can do in Constructed. In Sealed, you're probably drawing 1 card a turn every turn, maybe occasionally drawing 1 extra card, but it's just not enough to spend a whole card on this ability to, you know, maybe you use it 1 time, maybe at the very beginning of the game you're able to get your 4th land on the battlefield a little bit early, but really you're probably not going to do it past that. So I don't think this is a very good card at all, unless there's some weird deck you put together where you know you're going to be able to have extra land in hand every game. I just don't think it's very good. Moving on, we've got the Underdark Basilisk, which is a 2-mana 1/2 with Death Touch. So good, right? Death touching creatures that are 1 mana or 2 mana are, I think, almost always going to see play in Sealed. It's just a nice, it's basically some repellent against bigger creatures, against bombs. It lets you deal with pretty much any, you know, attacker, and it's really great when you have a fight spell or a bite spell, a way for this creature to inflict effect damage onto other creatures, because that death touch carries over. So I think it's just going to be a playable card in virtually any green deck. But if you do have some ways, some fight spells or bite spells, it's going to be, of course, fantastic. And I think you just put this in every green deck ever. It's also going to be quite good in green-black in particular, because they have some effects that like force your opponent to block. So forcing your opponent to block and then attacking in with an Underdark Basilisk is a good way to, you know, turn this into kind of an actual removal spell attached to a body. So moving on, we have You Find a Cursed Idol. So 2 mana, smash it, lift the curse, or steal its eyes. Those are our options. But smashing it is destroying an artifact, lifting the curse is destroying an enchantment, and stealing its eyes is making a treasure token and venturing into the dungeon. So this does give you that versatility, right? That versatility of being able to destroy enchantments, things like class enchantments or artifacts that are important. But the fail case is pretty bad. Steal its eyes is sort of the base case. If your opponent just doesn't have anything to target and you just need to use this card to do something, you're making a treasure token and venturing into a dungeon for for a whole card. It's not that that's not worth 2 mana, but it's not really worth a card, right? So I think this is probably not great. Even in sealed best of 1, where we really would appreciate the versatility, I don't think I would run this card as a default. I think I'd probably skip it. But maybe it's worth trying. If we end up in green, maybe we throw this in there, see how it does. If it ends up being as bad as I expect, take it out, because it is a lot of versatility, and it is nice to have a main deck way to deal with a lot of weird card types. Moving on, we have Choose Your Weapon. 3 mana instant, 2 weapon fighting, double target creature's power and toughness until end of turn. Or Archery, this spell deals 5 damage to a creature with flying. I think this is pretty good. It's the same idea, right? You have 2 options here that are good in different situations. One is a weird combat trick that can kind of just win you the game out of nowhere, which is what I was talking about with these 3 mana combat tricks that I really like seeing. Doing something like using this on a creature with 7 power, making it a 14 power attacker and just killing our opponent just because they chose, I'll take the 7, whatever. And then we just get to kill them on the spot. And just a doubling of power and toughness is not a bad combat trick in general. All that would be too situational for me to want to use a whole card on. Too much opportunity cost for our opponent, doesn't block in the way we would prefer. But having Archery attached to that kind of changes the game, because this is a situation where doubling power and toughness might be pretty bad, right? Your opponent has a big, dare I say it, white dragon flying in the sky, beating you down for 4 damage, and you have a little, let's say you have a 3/3, you know, something that doubling its power and toughness would allow you to beat that 4/4 in combat, but it's flying, you can't hit the damn thing. So having Archery as sort of a completely different situation that this would be effective in means that you don't, you kind of spread where this card will be useful across multiple different situations, and I think that's the key with these modal you do a blank cards. So I would say, yeah, I would definitely be happy running this one. And it's more of a situational card where the fail cases aren't as evident as they are with You Find a Cursed Idol. I think both of these options are regular enough that you'll be happy with them, and also good enough that they're worth the card. Find the Path. So 3 mana, enchant land. When Find the Path enters the battlefield, venture to a dungeon. And enchanted land has tap, add green. So a ramp spell that lets you venture to a dungeon, probably not worth it. I don't think this is, unless you just have some weird strategy where you want lots of green mana, you have some really big creatures like 7-8 drops or something. Even then, I just don't build that deck, I guess. It's the better solution. I don't think this is good. I think you would never be too happy spending a whole card on a 3 mana ramp spell that gives you a little minor benefit of venturing. So I probably would never run this card. Sylvan Shepherd, 3 mana, 2/3, vigilance, so decent body, and whenever it attacks, you roll a d20. You either gain 1 life if you roll 1 through 9, 2 life if you roll a 10 through 19, or if you crit, if you get a natural 20, you gain 5 life. So quite good in the white-green life gain deck. So if you have any cards that benefit from, like, when you gain life, this card gets a +1/+1 counter. There's a few cards like that in green and white, and these repeatable life gain effects, like Prosperous Innkeeper and Sylvan Shepherd, are going to be the bread and butter of a deck like that. Outside of that, it's okay, right? A 2/3 vigilant body, like I said, isn't nothing. The life gain, the incidental life gain is nice, but Unlike Prosperous Innkeeper, where I think I'm pretty much happy putting this in almost any green deck, I think Sullen Shepherd, there's a lot of times you could cut this as like the worst of your playables, but it's never going to be like purely terrible, I don't think. Moving on, we got another situation card. You happen upon a glade. So 3 mana instant. We can either choose to Journey On, so search a library for up to 2 basic land cards, reveal them, and put them into your hand and shuffle, or we can choose to Make a Camp, which is return target permanent from your graveyard to your hand. Again, two very different situations and 2 fairly powerful effects. If we need to fix our mana, this gives us a way to do it, right? If we are just stuck with all forest and we're dying for a swamp, if we're in a 3-color deck and this allows us to go and grab both of our other colors, you know, if we need to fix, we can choose Journey On, but most of the time we're going to pick Make Camp, and that's what's good about these cards is they have this. Make a Camp is, you know, returning a permanent from your graveyard to your hand, kind of has the same problem as Fate's Reversal, but unlike Fate's Reversal, we have a pretty good ability, secondary ability to cast here with Journey On, so you're gonna, a lot of times this is going to be bringing your good bomb back to your hand, bringing your good like aura removal spell back from your graveyard to your hand. It can do a lot of good things with that Make Camp ability, but the fail case of Journey On isn't bad at all. It's going to make sure you hit at least a couple more land drops if that's what you really need to do. Bullet, so this is a payoff for the green-black archetype. At the beginning of your end step, if a creature died this turn, put a +1/+1 counter on Bullet. So these are a type of creature from D&D that are just now making their way to Magic. They're pretty cute little guys. You can see it destroying a village there, killing multiple people. But it's a pretty okay card. So green-black is where this shines, of course. If you have a way to sacrifice creatures, if you have a way to force combat, if you have a way to make your opponent block Death Touchers, if you have fight spells or bite spells, this of course gets a lot better because you can kind of guarantee that a creature is going to die roundabout every turn on your turn, and that means you're going to be able to continue to grow this thing. If you can grow it once, it's worth it, right? A 4-mana 4/4 is a pretty nice chunky body. If you can even just attack in with your creatures on turn 4, your opponent makes a trade and then play this, you're going to feel like you're pretty far ahead. But being able to trigger it repeatedly is where this gets nuts, and that's typically going to happen more in green-black than any other color combination, but borderline playable in other color combinations. Inspiring Bard, so this is a 4-mana 3/3 elf bard. I really like the art. You can see the rest of the party saying, please God, make him stop. That sounds like a bard to me, but when it enters the battlefield, you choose one, either Bardic Inspiration, target creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn, or Song of Rest, you gain 3 life, and I think this is pretty good. So this set has a lot of modal cards I've noticed, and not all of them are the you do the blank or choose your weapon, you know, cards featuring this party. Even cards like Inspiring Bard to give you a lot of options, and like those cards, both of these options are decent in different situations, and that makes the card good, I think. Imagine you're against an aggressive deck and you just need to stabilize. This does a great job at stabilization. You play this on turn 4, a nice 3/3 chunky body to either stop their 2/2 attackers or trade with a 3/1 or something, and you gain 3 life to help cushion your life total, get you back into the game, get you back out of the danger zone. Or if you're on the aggressive side, if you are the green-red beat-down deck and your opponent has a pretty good blocker, well, now you can make one of your creatures that's on the battlefield have +2/+2, get through some extra damage, get closer to closing out the game. So Inspiring Bard, quite good, I think. I mean, for a common, right? It's not like busted or anything, but I think I would be happier playing Inspiring Bard in every deck compared to something like Bullet, where Bullet's going to be way better in green-black than Inspiring Bard is, but just as generically good, having this flexibility I think is pretty important. You Meet in a Tavern, so another modal card here. 4 mana, uncommon, sorcery, and you choose one. Form a party, look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may reveal any number of creature cards from among them and put them into your hand. Put the rest at the bottom of your library in any order. And start a brawl. Creatures you control get +2/+2 until end of turn. So another like great card out of this series of cards, because again, both the options are good in different situations. If you've already established a board, Start a Brawl is a really nice way to close things out, a really nice way to make combat really bad for your opponent. It is a sorcery, so it's not like you can surprise them with this +2/+2, but being able to do this pre-combat and crashing, like just putting so much power on the board that your opponent has to block poorly just to not die, just to not go down to really low life totals, it's still really nice in that regard. And in the cases where that isn't true, in a case where this overrun type of effect wouldn't be very good, you have Form a Party, so you get to kind of build your hand instead of affecting the board. So you do want to have your deck with enough creatures that this this hits multiple, right? You don't want to pay 4 mana to get 1 card out of your deck. But assuming you have enough creatures, you have, 18, 19, even 20 creatures, so you meet a tavern's always going to hit, 3-ish creatures. This is going to be a pretty fantastic card, I think. So moving on to Owlbear, which is maybe the best green common in the set. 5 mana, 4/4 trample. When it enters the battlefield, draw a card. It seems like green gets one of these cards in every set nowadays, these chunky creatures that also draw them a card. We saw it with a wolf with Kaldheim, for example, and that ended up being a definitive card of the format, maybe the best common in the entire format. This isn't quite as good because that card had the ability of having some cost reduction built into it, but this is still good. A 5 mana 4/4 trample body is still going to affect the board in a massive way, especially if you have ways to pump it or put equipment on it, or take advantage of the trample in an additional way. But it's a 5 mana 4/4 relevant body that doesn't cost a card, that immediately replaces itself, and you really can't ask for more. So yeah, just a fantastic card. We also have Hill Giant Herd Gorger. So this is like sort of similar to Inspiring Bard in what I was talking about, where you kind of drop this down to stabilize things, right? You're up against an aggressive deck, you've removed and you blocked and you traded, and you're kind of hanging on for dear life, and then Herd Gorger is what puts you back in the game, right? If you play this on turn 6, you gain the 3 life, you have a big 7/6 they can't deal with, and it kind of puts you out of reach. Outside of that role, though, it's pretty mediocre, right? 6 mana is a lot, and a 7/6 body, while being chunky, this doesn't have like trample or anything. It doesn't have vigilance that lets it be an attacker and a blocker. If you are against an aggressive deck, it's probably going to have to hang back and not make great use out of that 7/6 body. It's something that really benefits from something like Goblin Morningstar. If we can give it trample, make it an 8/6 attacker with trample, then it becomes ridiculous, a great way to finish out the game. But in general, I think this is an okay card. Doesn't hold a candle to something like Owlbear, though. So moving on, we're past all the basic colors. We're going to look at the 2 gold cards we have here, and then a bunch of colorless cards. But we've got Orcus, Prince of Undeath, already talked about him. Maybe the best card in our pool. Brunor, Battlehammer. So 4 mana, 5/3 legendary creature dwarf warrior. Each creature you control gets +2/+0 for each equipment attached to it, and you may pay 0 rather than pay the equip cost of the first equip ability you activate each turn. Great card. The fact that we've got 2 of them is pretty crazy. Makes me want to at least look at red-white. That wasn't really what I had in mind looking at the rest of our pool, but this is a pretty fantastic payoff for the equip archetype. Not only does it make all of our equip cards better by giving that +2/+0, but it makes them like almost busted by removing that equip cost for the first equip each turn. Even though you can't just swap things around by having free equip costs all the time, most of the time that first free equip is enough to really put your deck over the top. So fantastic card, really powerful and common, and really makes me want to consider looking at red-white equipment. 50 feet of rope. This is a hard one to evaluate. I've looked at this card and kind of puzzled, and I'm not sure where exactly I come away with this one, but it's a 1 mana artifact. You can tap it, and target wall can't block this turn. So you can either climb over, target wall can't block this turn, tap it and pay 3 to tie up. Target creature doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step. It doesn't tap them. Important to keep that in mind. It doesn't get a blocker out of the way, but a creature that's already tapped doesn't untap. And it also has Repel down, so 4 mana, tap it, and venture into a dungeon, activate only as a sorcery. So this is the first tap ability is almost never going to matter, right? That climb over is borderline flavor text. So is it worth it for a bad removal ability, a bad repeatable removal ability with tie up, attached to a repeatable venture ability that can help during board stalls? I don't know. It's overpriced for the tie-up ability, and I would say probably isn't very good. But it's ambivalent enough that I would want to try it out. It's a weird enough card, and I could be surprised by this. But I would if you just wanted to play it safe, I would venture on the side of this not being very good. Great Axe, 1 mana equipment. Equipped creature gets +4/+0. And it has an equip cost of 5, so a massive equip cost. This does satisfy my personal requirement of equipment of making every creature a pain in the ass. That's really what you want to see with your equipment, but the equip cost being 5 is just so brutal. We do have Brunor, though, and so Brunor could make that equip cost 0. And then a 1 mana equipment with 0 equip cost that gives you +4/+0 is a whole different story. So You know, if we have the red-white equipment deck and Brunor, the 2 copies of Brunor, maybe Great Axe could make it. But outside of that very specific deck, this is not a playable card. Spiked Pit Trap, 1 mana artifact, flash, and then 5 mana to sacrifice it. Choose a target creature, then roll a d20. 1 through 9, it deals 5 damage to that creature. 10 through 20 deals 5 damage, and you make a treasure token. So this does give you the ability to do it as a surprise to kind of mess up combat. You know, you can, if you have the 6 mana open on 1 turn, you can flash it in, crack it, and then deal 5 damage to something, and then also like block it with a 2/2, do effectively 7 damage across 2 cards. Pretty desperate because then you're kind of 2 for 1ing yourself. More realistically, this is probably just a card you run if you have no other removal. You do need removal in Sealed. You do need removal in pre-release events because they're so defined by the bombs, right? Usually people are just going to play all the bombs they can in their deck. They're going to look at their 6 rares and say, I'm going to try to put 5 of these in one deck, and then you have to have a way to actually beat those bombs. So if you just don't have any other removal, this is your go-to. This is your kind of fallback for all colors to have a way to kill most bombs. So I think it is actually a playable card. You're not going to be really happy to play it, but it is definitely a playable card. And then Mimic as our last card, a 2 mana artifact treasure. So it's, even though it's not a treasure token, it has the treasure subtype, which means that you can sacrifice it to add 1 mana of any color. It also has a activated ability for 2, where Mimic becomes a shapeshifter artifact creature token with base power and toughness of 3/3 until end of turn. Probably not very good. If you just need treasure, if you're just like in the red-black deck, you have all these treasure payoffs, and you just need as many ways to make treasure as you can, maybe. And I mean, a 2 mana activated cost for a 3/3 isn't terrible, right? I mean, it basically dodges sorcery speed removal spells. If your opponent only has a sorcery speed kill spell and has nothing to block this, it's going to be really annoying to keep hitting hit for 3. So that is kind of an upside in some sense. You know, it's obviously a downside in the sense that you have to pay 2 mana for it to do anything. But I think this is actually probably an okay card. If you just need that extra playable, if you just need that treasure in your deck, or just need 1 more creature, it can do that ability. But in general, I think you want to avoid it if you got better things to do. Alright, so a lot of things we talked about here, but first and foremost, let's see what our red-black deck looks like. Because we got the cool Demon, because we got the Zorn, let's see what it looks like if we build a cool red-black deck. Let's just see if this is what we want to be doing. So, Precipitous Drop, Gelatinous Cube, Manticore, Drider maybe, and we don't have any real dice rolling stuff going on. Sure, Slayer, maybe Hoarding Ogre, Faraday's Fireball, and Swarming Goblins. And where does that leave us? Those are the cards where we're pretty happy playing these. We still need 2 more playables. So we have 12 creatures, so a little light on creatures with this red-white, red-black build. How many ways do we have that actually involve rolling dice? Not many. Almost none, actually. We've got like Faraday's Fireball, so this Brazen Dwarf isn't quite going to get there. We could play like Morningstar. We don't have a lot of good ways to make use of Trample, but we do have stuff like Drider. Swarming Goblins gets a little bit better with Trample. Okay, I think we have enough to play Morningstar. And then last but not least, we could play 1 copy of Baleful Beholder, I suppose. Maybe Zombie Ogre is something. We do have a lot of cards that kind of force trades, right? Cards like Hoarding Ogre, our opponent will want to block. Cards like Manticore is a good way to get some removal. So we could play Zombie Ogre here, and we could end up like this. So we're in a red-black deck. We're a little bit light on creatures. We only have 13. Although Goblin Morningstar is effectively a creature, so we're like 14. But we're still a little bit light. We're a pretty good aggressive deck. We have these Warlock classes to help finish things out. Orcus as a way to wipe the board if our opponent gets too out of control, or a way to bring back a bunch of creatures in better circumstances. So this would be sort of our red-black deck, and our other option I think to look at is white. So if we went into white, we would have Cave of the Frost Dragon, we would have Loyal Warhound, and maybe Teleportation Circle. So if we do go into black, I think black is our best color for sure. We have Vampire Spawn, which would be nice to blink with Teleportation Circle. Gelatinous Cube, of course. Manticore could be good. Swarming Goblins. Well, that's actually in red. Never mind. We could also splash. We could also splash Orcus. We could go like a black-white deck, splashing Orcus off of like treasure. We don't have any actual fixing, unfortunately. So it would have to be like a treasure splash. Let's take out the red for a second. Let's say, go down all these red cards. And let's say instead we wanted to go white. We're going to leave Orcus in, but let's say white, 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 white. I don't know if I actually want to run this Ranger's Hawk, but let's see. Dawnbreaker Cleric, and last but not least, I guess your Ambush. How many creatures does that leave us with? Still 13 creatures, so still a little bit short on creatures. It does give us another good finisher in the form of the all-powerful White Dragon. Lets us play Cave of the Frost Dragon pretty free. We could just drop the Orcus, but then that's a... we don't really have a good way to splash it, unfortunately. Although we do have Thieves Tools, Horde Robber. We can blink the Thieves Tools with our Teleportation Circle. So how many... if we were to run black-white, how good is Teleportation Circle here? So we have... 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So we have a lot more blinkable targets for sure. We could also play this Borealia Pegasus, which isn't really a good blink target. You know what? I think I'm going to try this. I think I'm going to try black-white splashing red. I think I want to give this a shot. I'm not sure if this is the right choice. There's obviously some ways this could go wrong. We're only going to have the one red source in the form of this mountain, and the rest of our red is going to be just gotten through our treasure makers, which is a little bit sketchy with what we have out of our black here. But I think this is good. I want to try this. Let's go down. What card do we want to go? I guess we go down the Ranger's Hawk. We don't really have a way to take good advantage of that. Warlock class is kind of a way where we could really benefit off of that, being able to hit our opponent for one over and over again. We could bump it up to 2. That's not tons, so let's just run it like this. And so we got black-white splashing red. We might end up switching it up. Like, that's something you're allowed to do in sealed and pre-release events, where you're able to kind of go back to the drawing board and rebuild the deck if it's not performing exactly how you like. That's not against the rules or anything. Nobody's going to call you out for in between games rebuilding your deck, so feel free to do that. We might actually do that here. We might go back to red-black. That might be the more solid of the options here, but I do want to try... this is kind of a more interesting build, I think, and I want to try it out and see what it's like. So let's go into game 1 here. Here we go. All right, up against low 5 Chillbrash. Don't know what that means, but this looks pretty good. We've got Dawnbreaker Cleric, and... okay... our opponent's running Spare Dagger. It's not a card I consider particularly playable, so I'll be interested to see what they do with it. So what this is it gives a creature +1/+0, and when it attacks, you can sacrifice it. I guess the idea here is just to benefit from the... do we want to... there's no enchantments to destroy, but using Power Word Kill on the Steadfast Paladin, it is going to be kind of good here because it's going to make it impossible for our Dawnbreaker Cleric to block. But I think we just play this. I think we just play this and gain 2 life. Kind of meh, but our opponent is looking to be pretty aggressive, so we do benefit a bit from that ability. And if our opponent spends the turn here, just like equipping up the Steadfast Paladin, spending a mana on that, then we can Precipitous drop it next turn. And Teleportation Circle looking pretty damn good. That we've kind of built our deck around Teleportation Circle. Well, okay. They do get to gain 2 life for free here, but that's alright. Soul Knight, okay, that's got to die. That has got to die. So this card is the one I was talking about, the 3 mana, 3/2, when it deals combat damage to a player, draw card. We'd like to play Vampire Spawn here, but we much more prefer to make sure we can kill this thing. That can absolutely run away with the game. Given the fact that we're not super built around venturing, I think we're just going to go down the mine of the Fandelver here. White Dragon? It's the White Dragon. No, we're going to put it at the bottom. We need lands at the moment. No attacks. No reason to attack into deal them 1 damage where they gain back 2 and deal less 2. So just better to block here, I think. It also incentivizes them to equip up their Steadfast Paladin, which we're okay with. We don't really care if they do that. And eventually we're going to get down this... Oh, we get to blow it up. Second spell each turn costs 1 less. So now we're going to get down... This is a little bit brutal. No blocks. We're going to have to take our beats from this Steadfast Paladin, but we get to do this. Teleportation Circle and immediately kill their Monk class, which is absolutely awesome. Yeah, I think I much prefer us going into Black-White and taking advantage of the Teleportation Circle. It's just so much more interesting than the pretty, pretty standard red-black deck we had. So, gonna take 3 more damage here, but then we get to play Vampire Spawn, gain 2 life, and then blink it, gain 2 more life, and then we're gaining life too. So, we're kind of back in the game. Minimus Containment. All right, okay, that's a little brutal. No blocks. Okay, that's a pretty good draw. So, do we want to Vampire Spawn here and leave a Power Word Kill? That leaves us something to trade with. We can also play Zombie Ogre, but this goes kind of bad if they have a removal spell. We can also play Orcus. Do we have anything good to get back with Orcus yet? Not yet. And we don't really want to just Orcus to kill the Steadfast Paladin, so I think we're just going to go Zombie Ogre. And attack. We can't really block this thing anyway, so if they do have a removal spell for our Zombie Ogre, blocking with this Dawnbreaker Cleric is not really going to be an option because this thing has 3 power, so we'd rather just get in the 1 point of damage there. Half-Elf Monk, so that's a good way to block down our Zombie Ogre. So how much mana do we have here? We could just wipe the board. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 1, 2, 3, so we're 1 mana short from killing both their creatures. We could just Power Word Kill the Half-Elf Monk, which I think is what we're going to do, because that lets us venture to the dungeon with this Zombie Orc. So we'll just Power Word Kill this thing. Go to combat, hit our opponent for 3. We're going to give them the option of trading with our Vampire Spawn. Because we have this Orcus just sitting out, yeah, we're going to make a treasure. Because there's a decent chance we wipe the board with Orcus. Right now we're looking at getting something back with Orcus as our ideal situation here. Blink Dog. Alright. Okay, Blink Dog. So a 1/1 double striker that can phase itself out for 4. So we'll see. We'll see. I guess we can Orcus now. Huh. Yeah, you know what? We're going to take the hit here. Sure. Yeah, that's fine. We're actually not going to offer the trade. Because we're going to Orcus here for 2, and that lets us kill the Blink Dog and also the Steadfast Paladin. Alright, so that's what we're going to... I guess we attack first. So go to combat. Attack, attack. There's a chance here they have a pump spell with this Blink Dog, but if they do that, that's fine. We don't care. We'd rather them use the... Okay, that was going to happen no matter what here. Sure. Now we get to go Orcus for 2. Do I want to get this off the battlefield? Do we have a way to get rid of this? Yeah, I guess we do have a way to kill this Minimus Containment, don't we? So what we're going to do instead is crack this for red and do this for 2 without cracking that Minimus Containment one, because we don't actually want that in our graveyard. There we go. We wiped all their creatures. We have a 5/4 in the air, and we still have a Mana Core coming in. So we've got a pretty good board here. If we ever find a way to get rid of this Minimus Containment, we'll be just nuts. Okay, another one. Ah, ha, ha! We've got one too. So now we get to Minimus Containment there, Minimus Containment, which means we get our Teleportation Circle back. Oh yeah, we're in the money now. And now we get to blink our Dawnbreaker Cleric, which means we get to blow up their Minimus Containment. And get back our Demon. Oh yeah. Oh yeah, it's all coming together. Man, Teleportation Circle is nuts. I'm so glad we went with this deck. Ooh. Oh yeah. Oh yes. Oh yes. A little bit of a rub in here, but the game's not over yet. Oh yeah, we're vampire spawning for sure. Attack our opponent. And they need a literal Wrath of God not to die here. We're going to blink Vampire Spawn. I guess we should have blinked the tapped one, but it doesn't matter. Alright, opponent. Do you have some miracle off the top of your deck? They do not. Alright. Woo! Woo! Okay, well that was sweet. It has assuaged my fears of going into black-white instead of black-red. I think black-red was the more obvious deck, but black-white seems to be the more fun deck. Teleportation Circle is just so sweet. I can't resist blinking. Blinking is my favorite strategy in Magic, so I'm a little bit biased, but man, this is cool. And this Warlock class we were getting up to, once we get up to, really, if we drew this turn, we could have played the Plains, activated this Warlock class, attacked our opponent with all this, burned them with the Vampire Spawn as well, and then duplicated all that damage thanks to our Warlock class. So they were going to need some literal, actual miracle to survive this turn, and they did not have it. So, sweet. All right, here we go, game 2. All right, up against Mercurial, and we'll keep it. Brave Enfeeblement is a little iffy with no creatures. It's good as a combat trick more than it is as a removal spell, because they have to specifically play something with 1 toughness for it to be a removal spell. Which, don't get me wrong, is plenty of cards, but unless they play a white card or a card with 1 toughness, we kind of need a creature on the battlefield to make our Brave Enfeeblement do anything. That's a pretty good draw, because that means we get to go Warlock class and also activate Warlock class. Just as a reminder, class cards, let's see, how many lands do we have? Yeah, I think we're going to go with a land here. Maybe we go with Loyal. We'll go with Loyal Warhound, actually. If we miss lands, Loyal Warhound can catch us up, right? So why wouldn't we take the Loyal Warhound? But you need to level up classes on your own turn. Make sure to do that. All right, a little bit awkward. Do we just play the Warhound? Just to trade with this Direwolf Prowler, make them activated, I guess. Okay. Sure. Swamp, pass turn. Let's see if they pump the thing. If they pump it, we'll kill it. If they just trade, they just trade. Okay. Ray of Enfeeblement. So now this thing has no attack. If they use another pump spell, so be it. Okay. Alright, okay, so there was still a 1-mana removal spell. Not bad. Oof, we kind of got poopy on our draws, though. We drew, like, all of our 5+ drops in a row here. So we will pass the turn. If our opponent plays a land here and does nothing too crazy, we might just... You were ambushed on a road to put... okay, so they're gonna go get their lands. So this might be the time for us to bounce Loyal Warhound back to our hand just so we can hit our land drop next turn. Yeah, I think we're going to. So, return, back to our hand. Well, that's a little brutal now. But we're going to go Loyal Warhound, go get a Plains, put it on the battlefield, ramp ourselves a bit. So, if we knew we were going to draw a land that turn, we obviously wouldn't have done what we did, but the chances of us missing a land drop and being absolutely crushed by it were also pretty high. Okay, Volo needs to die. Volo is a pretty scary card. Ugh, second Warlock class isn't exactly what we wanted here. I guess we White Dragon. Man, we don't have a removal spell for Volo, though. That's so brutal. Well, we're going to White Dragon anyway. Tap down the Intrepid Outlander, start hitting our opponent for 3. Attack with Loyal Warhound. Yeah, this Volo is going to just crush us. Any sort of treasure maker so we could play this Orcus would be good. Any actual removal spells for Volo would be good, but they might just oh yeah, this is gonna hurt. So Volo doubles up the creature spells. Assuming that there's no other creatures on the battlefield that have matching types, and no creatures in your graveyard also that have matching types. So if they played a wolf right here, for example, it wouldn't work. And see, this didn't work because it's a wizard, and they already have a wizard with Volo. So something to keep in mind. So we can't really get through with this Warlock. I think we what we do here is Warlock class, activate it, go looking for a removal spell. Still no removal spell, huh? I guess we get this just in case they attack. Alright, well, pass the turn. No attacks. Do we want to attack? We don't want to attack. Okay. So now we have a way to deal with an attacking creature, but they're just going to get so much value off this Volo. We've dug deep. Yeah, that's gonna break us. Yeah, doubling up this hill giant's just absolutely brutal. Yeah, there's not much we could do about this. I mean, we dug deep looking for treasure, looking for removal spells. They all happen to be on the bottom of our deck, so not much we could really do.
Once I was the ape of the hour, they think I'm a coward, an absolute zero. I'm nobody's hero.
Yeah, okay. We aren't going to bother blocking, so... Alright. That was Lost to Volo, which is a very cool card. One of the coolest commanders to come out of this set, I think. I may make a video on him, actually, but yeah, we just... had to have a removal spell to him, couldn't find it, and we lost the game. So, but this is kind of what Sealed is about, what pre-releases are about. It's really about bombs, right, and answers to bombs. And we do have a lot of answers, but if you don't draw the answers to the bombs, that's just not gonna... You're gonna lose to a bomb, right? So, removal is always, just like always in Limited, is key, but I think it's even probably more so in Sealed, where most of your pool is going to be kind of homogenized in power. There's going to be a few standout bomb cards that kind of rule the roost of your pool, and that's going to be true for everybody. So having an answer to that is pretty crucial to the Sealed experience. Yeah, we'll keep this. Going second isn't ideal with this hand. We really want to get this Horde Robber down turn 2 before they have a chance to do anything. But we're probably not going to be in position to attack with this Horde Robber too easily. Well, they got a Horde Robber too, okay. So we will play Horde Robber. Horde Robber to block their Horde Robber. They attack in, we are going to block, okay. Sure, so yeah, let's activate first. We might get a Raven Feeblement or some other one-drop. Okay, Minimus Containment. We'll definitely take that. Would be nice to have the lands, but I think we're better off just taking the Minimus Containment for an answer to whatever crazy thing they have going on next. We are going to attack in next turn with our Horde Robber. Reaper's Talisman. Okay. That makes this a lot harder to block. Because it gives it Death Touch. We're just not going to block this. But we might actually have to Minimus Containment the Reaper's Talisman. It is a pretty brutal card to try to race. By brutal, I mean effectively impossible. So we're going to go Minimus... Yeah, this can't destroy it. Yeah, that can only hit enchantments. So Minimus Containment on the Reaper's Talisman. Get rid of that for good. And... do I want to play this just as a blocker? You know what? I think I will. I'll go Dawnbreaker Cleric just to stop their ramp a bit. Although I guess they have enough ramp that it doesn't super matter, but we will gain 2 life. Cushions our life a bit, gives us a blocker. We don't really need the extra mana at this point because we have this mountain. We have the mana to cast all the spells in our deck at this point. Okay, that's a scary card. Oh, and they've got a creature too, so they immediately get to venture. So what Varus does is every time they cast a creature or planeswalker, they get to venture into the dungeon. And that is going to let them churn through the dungeon pretty quick here. This card is a weird card too. 3 mana, 4/5, doesn't untap, and then whenever you gain life, you untap it. So, how do we want to do this? I guess we attack first and see if they block with any of their creatures. Okay, we're okay with this trade. We have to go Mana Core, blow up their Roper, drain our opponent for 1. Would love a removal spell for Varus, but that's a little bit more specific. Volo, when we were looking for a removal spell, we just needed pretty much anything because even the -2 spell would do it. Here we actually need something pretty decent to kill the Varus, I think. They're going off. Huh. Are they actually 3-color? They actually are 3-color, okay. So they're green, black, white, or Abzan. And it looks like they're focused around venturing as much as possible. White Dragon, okay. So would we rather play this Drider or this Zombie Ogre? Zombie Ogre blocks pretty well against what they're doing. I guess we'll go Zombie Ogre. Attack. Oh, it's got reach. Ugh. Yikes. Yeah, that was a mistake. I guess we do get to venture into the dungeon. Maybe we can pretend like it was on purpose. Let's scry 1. Go looking for a removal spell. I guess that technically shuts down Varus for 1 turn, but that's not really what we want. So we're going to just keep hunting for removal spells for that Varus. Fate's Reversal. Oof. Well, okay, so they've completed their dungeon. They get to make a 2/2. Yeah, Varus is just stomping us this game. We gotta find... Well, that's what we were looking for. A nice removal spell. Take 8. Desperately need a way to deal with our bonus board here. Oh, and it's a tap land too. That's pretty bad. Well, we can play Drider. We can also play Vampires. Yeah, we'll play Drider. No attacks. See where this goes. Things are not looking good for us, if that wasn't obvious. Bullet. Well, that's going to end up growing. There's no way we can afford not to block the thing. Alright, we will discard the Vampire Spawn. Wow, they have a... Okay, our opponent's deck is just disgusting. Well, another game where we just weren't able to find our removal spells and we lost because of it. We're just not going to block here. There's effectively no card that saves us from that position. So, let's take a look at our deck. We've been having some trouble finding removal spells. Let's see how many removal spells do we actually have? How likely are we to find them? And would we be better off in a different color? So, we have Ray of Enfeeblement, which wouldn't have done it there. We have... Okay, you hear something on Watch would have been able to kill Varus because he was attacking with it. Power Word Kill would have been able to do it. Minimus Containment would have been able to do it. So those are 3 cards we were hunting for. 4 cards with the Gelatinous Cube. Yeah. You know, I think 4 removal spells and not finding any of them is a little bad. You know, that's... We probably should have hit something by now, especially because we were digging a little bit with Warlock's class. Looking at red, if we were to do red black instead, we would lose 1 white removal spell, 2. So we'd lose 2, and we would gain 1 with Dragon's Fire, which would have been able to do it, and 2 with Veritas Fireball. So I don't think we were actually better off being in... We're pretty much in the exact same boat. We just needed to draw a little bit better is what it came down to. Yeah, I think we just run it back. I think we're not so much better off. Again, it might be a little bit more consistent if we were in red-black, but I think we just need to get a little bit luckier when it comes to drawing our removal spells. Realistically, in all that time, we probably should have found, and with both Volo and Varus, having 4 removal spells, and in the case of Volo, there was actually like 5 or 6, and hitting none of them, oof, man, that is a pretty brutal, pretty brutal hand there, so we're not going to keep that. We'll keep this and go down to Orcus. Priest of Ancient Lore is looking pretty good here. Maybe we should have gone down the White Dragon, but we're looking for a pretty particular set of cards to be able to cast that Orcus. And White Dragon, we just need to draw pretty much any lands. Alright, well, so far, so good. Priest should let us draw a card here. Okay, Teleportation Circle plus Priest is a really good combo. So assuming we're able to resolve Teleportation Circle, we should be pretty good. Our opponent's leaving up mana, huh? We're not going to cast Teleportation Circle into a removal spell. So we're just going to attack here. We'll play Thieves Tools. They want to counter that, go for it. They do not. And then we're just going to leave up removal with Power Word Kill. Alright, so opponent did nothing. We're going to wait for them to tap out before we do this Teleportation Circle, because it could potentially win us the game. Sure, opponent scries 1. I think we are going to kill this thing with Power Word Kill. Eventually White Dragon can deal with it, but we're going to do Teleportation Circle next turn, so I think I'd rather just kill this now. Drider, okay, well Drider makes me wish we hadn't done that, because it's a pretty solid trade there. Teleportation Circle, blink the Priest of Ancient Lore before they can interact. So now Teleportation Circle, even if it's dead, it's already drawn us a card, so we're in pretty good shape. We've got the Raven Feeblement up. If they are a white deck, so this Raven Feeblement could be a 1-mana kill spell for pretty sizable threat. Alright, they're going to do nothing. Ooh, Minimus Containment's nice. Go to combat. Attack. Considering killing this priest. Yeah, that's fine. We are going to not play the White Dragon into this counter spell. We're going to play the Drider. If they counter that, then sure. We still have this White Dragon coming up, sure. They have Bar the Gate. We're okay with that. We could have just not blocked at all there. Or we could have just not cast anything at all there, but I'd rather get this counter spell out of the way. I doubt they have 2. Yeah, we will blink the Thieves Tools. That's kind of a cool side benefit, is we get to keep blinking the Thieves Tools to make treasure tokens at least. So we're continuing to kind of ramp ourselves even with the absence of creatures. Okay, Mordenkainen is something we cannot let survive. Ooh, okay. That's a little bit scarier than I was thinking, but we're going to go White Dragon. How is this a 6/6? Oh, twice the number of cards in hand. Wow. And we'll continue to blink the Thieves Tools. Maybe we should have just used the Minimus Containment on Mordenkainen. Okay, he's going to draw some cards, so that's okay. We're going to try to kill the Mordenkainen with damage, but I guess that's actually pretty difficult. I thought it was actually... I was thinking this, for some reason, this dog token wasn't going to be a big deal, but maybe I was wrong about that. That's actually a ridiculous token just for a -2. I guess it is a 6 mana Planeswalker, which is something. Okay. We would like it if our opponent ever played any white creature in their white deck, but everything they played has been blue. Okay. Yeah, we're gonna have to just Minimus Containment this Mordenkainen now, for sure. Alright, so we've got 5, our opponent's got more, yeah, so we can definitely use the Warhound here. Get rid of this guy forever. Sure, opponent's cracking their land. And we'll play the Warhound, go get a Plains, and pass the turn. Let's see, we've got 6, our opponent's got 7, yeah, so we can blink this again. And the problem is this dog is going to beat the crap out of us. We can hit it with the White Dragon next turn, but man, it's dealing so much damage. We're going to have to jump here. We can't take 8 damage. Wow, that is a ridiculous token. We got to find removal for that dog ASAP. The only chance we got. 50 feet of rope, sure. Alright, they're just going to start venturing. Because I guess they got nothing better to do. They technically are leaving up a counter spell here, though. We can't forget that Mordenkainen is now treasure. Wow, they actually... Wow, they actually lost their dog token. They played too many cards. Holy crap. Okay, that might give us some breathing room here. So we're going to play White Dragon. White Dragon, tap down the Soul Knife Spy. We're just going to go ahead and play the Pegasus, even though we lose some into the battlefield value by doing that, but we need some bodies in the battlefield here. Then we're going to blink the White Dragon again, tap down the Air Cult Elemental. Wow, yeah. Wow. We're back in this. We're definitely back in this game. And this rope doesn't do much of anything besides just venture, because we're going to be able to untap our creatures by just blinking them effectively. I guess it does stop them from attacking. If we attack with them, and they keep them tapped down, even though they get untapped during our turn, at the end of our turn, we do, I guess, effectively lose the attack there. Whew. Yeah, this is a close one for sure. Okay, they put a counter on the Soul Knife Spy, sure. We need to draw good here. The opponent's on 3 or more colors. Oh, Cave the Frost Dragon's nice. So we'll go to combat. Attack and attack. They could have the removal spell for attacking creatures. Maybe we should lead back White Dragon. I guess we just lose the game, effectively. Yeah. Okay. We're not going to attack with White Dragon. We need to keep the Soul Knife Spy tapped down. At least until we have a little bit more defense. Okay. Opponent has still yet to play a white creature, which is a little annoying. Green is kind of scary. Green means they have more options in terms of getting stuff back from the graveyard. So if they sacrifice this Mordenkainen and have a card that says bring back permanent from the graveyard, that's pretty spooky. Another 50 feet of rope, okay. Are they going to go ahead and activate it? Looks like they are. That means we do have a free attack here, though. They're just going down the basic path. I kind of would expect them to go down the Mad Mine, whatever, but maybe they just need to scry and draw as much as possible here, looking for an answer to Minimus Containment. All right, putting that to the bottom. Now we can attack with White Dragon, though, and if they block with their Air Cult Elemental, we can. So we're gonna go like this. Equip up the Pegasus so it can't be blocked. Attack. Okay, so we're gonna kill the Air Cult Elemental, because apparently they just don't have white creatures in their deck at all. Play the Vampire Spawn. Go to our end step. Keep this tap down. Make sure they can't draw cards here. Okay. We've got it going here. We can activate this Frost Cave Dragon, or Cave of the Frost Dragon, to have another 3-powered attacker in the sky. We don't quite have lethal here because they can use one of the ropes to keep our Borealia Pegasus tapped down. Okay, or not. Interesting. The problem here is for them is that we can move over the Thieves Tool to our Vampire Spawn, which I guess we probably should have done last turn. And then we have that plus the Frost Dragon is a... Okay, does our opponent... Let's see. Ray of Frost. Okay. So that's going to keep our Borealia Pegasus from untapping. So they're not quite dead. Okay, are they? We could pick up this Vampire Spawn. That'll be 3, 7... Okay, this should be lethal. So we can go your ambush on the road. Pick up our Borealia Pegasus. Cast our Pegasus on the Vampire Spawn. Oh man, yeah, we don't actually are a little bit short here. I think I actually should have just used that as a combat trick instead of a bounce spell. Hopefully we don't end up losing because of that. Yeah, we're gonna White Dragon. Keep that Soul Knife Spy out of the equation. Alright, if they venture twice here, they're gonna have to use like all their mana. This does leave us in a position with more attackers doing it this way, but I think what I should have done there is given +1/+3 and activate the Cave of the Frost Dragon, and I think I could have killed them by blinking the Vampire Spawn, because right now they were effectively at 1 life last turn. Okay, now they're up by 1, sure. We still got them pretty close to dead here, though. Wow, they're just gonna draw a card? They've only got 2 mana left, though. I guess 3 if they play a land. But we have a lot of lethal attackers here. Okay, Monk class is not going to do it. Alright, so our opponent had a pretty cool deck, but... yeah, they scoop it up. Oh, that was a close game. That was a close game. We actually beat a Planeswalker, Mordenkainen, who did not make it easy. This is a ridiculous card. I just had never read this card closely enough, and... I knew the +2 was drawing, but the -2 making that dog, I thought it was going to be like maybe a 4/4 or a 5/5. That thing was a freaking 10/10. Alright, so we held on by the skin of our teeth. We kind of punted the last turn, to be honest. I thought I had enough mana to both play the Borealia Pegasus and activate the Cave of the Frost Dragon, but actually we did not. So probably what I should have done there is activate a Cave of the Frost Dragon, use this as a +1/+3, and just not given this Vampire Spawn flying. That would have let me get in for 4 here, let me get in for 4 here, that's 8, and then we would have been able to use the Teleportation Circle to blink Vampire Spawn, which would have, I think, been the final 2 points of damage. So I think we had Exacxies if we did it that way. Maybe we didn't, maybe we're still short, but the way I did it, we ended up 1 point of damage short effectively. So anyway, won that one by the skin of our teeth. Alright, on to the next one. Okay, up against Achilles 13, and man, we really wish we were on the play here. Getting in 1 hit with this Horde Robber would be such a huge deal. Opponents play Silver Raven. Okay, this is not a card I would consider very good. So it makes me think our opponent probably has more to do with it than meets the eye, because just a 1-mana 1/1 flyer isn't really much of anything. It is an artifact, if they have some sort of synergy with that, or more likely just some equipment or something to put on the Silver Raven. But it's not going to be able to block this Horde Robber, which I do think we'll play next turn, rather than activate this Warlock class. We just really want to get in 1 hit with this Warlock or with this Horde Robber. Well, that's not going to happen now, is it? Okay, well, our opponent, I don't know what they're doing, but it's messing up our Horde Robber plan. Okay, I think we... Is there any reason to activate this instead? I think we start putting stuff on the board. Even if we can't really get in very well here, I think I'd rather commit some to the board. Not sure what our opponent's game plan is. Okay, so they're blue-white. Looks like a controller, or a pretty control-y strategy. Okay, the Frost Dragon's pretty scary. Are they just blue-white flyers, maybe? Is the idea? Maybe we put the Fear of God in them. Yeah, let's attack and see. Maybe they're too afraid to block. There's no way. They definitely block here. But what if I got Death Touch? Shit. Alright. You didn't put the Fear of God in them. Now we're going to activate this, though. We don't really have anything to hit with this Dawnbreaker Cleric. Ray of Enfeeblement's interesting. We can use that to kill their dragon. I think we need the Ray of Enfeeblement. As nice as it would be to take the Borealia Pegasus so we can actually hit with this... Horde Robber, I think we need to... We need to Ray of Enfeeblement their Frost Dragon. That's just, that's too clean of an answer for too hard of a threat to hit. Okay, our opponent's actually on 3 colors. Interesting. That makes me... If I had known that, I might not have taken Ray of Enfeeblement, because the chance of them getting their second white source to activate this dragon is much reduced. Okay, that doesn't really help us, does it? Well, I guess we just Dawnbreaker Cleric and gain some life. We haven't seen any enchantments or anything. And we can also always pick it back up. Okay, let's attack first. We're going to keep bluffing every turn. And eventually it won't be a bluff. Yeah, okay. We'll go Dawnbreaker Cleric, gain some life back, undo all the work this Silver Raven's done. If they do play an enchantment that we just need to kill, we can pick it up with You're Ambushed on the road. Alright, they have the second white source. Let's see if they activate the cave. They're not going to do it this turn, but the turn after, maybe. If they just want to start attacking in the air. Sure. Ah, we've got our own Cave of the Frost Dragon. Alright, we will attack here. They'll block the Horde Robber. I guess their plan is just to venture into a dungeon this turn. We would like to hit a little bit more stuff to do here. Would be nice. Kind of had a weird draw. So the reason we were just attacking kind of pointlessly with that Horde Robber is we need to set the expectation that we're going to be doing that every turn. That way, when we do it on the turn, if we have some sort of combat trick or some way to, you know, give our creature death touch or some way to do something tricky, our opponent won't see anything off when we do it. They won't say, "Oh, wait, they've never attacked before. Why are they attacking now? Maybe I should not block, or maybe I should." You know, not tap out, or why did they not activate that secret door? Oh, you can only do it as a sorcery. That's pretty devastating. Okay, they're going to start doing it. Rather than getting in with their Cave of the Frost Dragon, they're actually going to start, venturing. Kind of interesting. I guess we just fire up our dragon this turn if we got nothing better to do, and just start crashing in. Alright, opponent chooses to... Alright, they're choosing the middle option. Makes sense. Okay. We'd love to draw something to challenge this secret door a little bit more. Well, it's not going to happen. Alright, well, we'll go Plains, activate Cave of the Frost Dragon. Hit our opponent for a bundle. They can block the robber, but they're taking 4 damage here. We are tapped out, so if they go for their dragon this turn, we don't have the ray up to kill it. But we can start leaving that up starting next turn. And I mean, I don't know, maybe we go ahead and get the last mode of this Warlock class online. I think I'd rather start activating the cave and leaving up ray, and then maybe the turn after that we can ultimate our Warlock class and also leave up ray. I like to start leaving up this ray because okay, well that's kind of scary. So Acerak the Archlich basically just lets them venture as much as they want for 3 mana apiece. It's because they're not in the Tomb of Annihilation, they're not going to be able to let it hit the battlefield anytime soon, but just being able to repeatedly venture for 3 mana does have some value. It is definitely... There's some tricks with this in Constructed where you can kind of repeat it infinitely, just continue to venture through other dungeons instead of ever completing the Tomb of Annihilation. But I do think in Draft, in Sealed, you probably want to actually finish the Tomb of Annihilation. 3 mana to repeatedly venture isn't usually worth it in Constructed. I mean, in Sealed, just because it's a lot of mana. You know, they just spent their whole turn venturing twice instead of committing anything to the board, and they got pretty minor effects from it. Granted, they're going to be able to kind of ooh, that's nice. Alright, so what do we want to do here? I guess all we have to blink is the Dawnbreaker Cleric right now, which isn't very interesting. So I think what we do is, yeah, we'll activate the Cave of the Frost Dragon, leave up Ray of Enfeeblement, and the goal here will be to... It is a little bit scary if they have removal for this Cave of the Frost Dragon, because we're going to have to tap out of white to attack with it. But I think we'd rather leave up Ray. Like, if we could leave up a plains here as well as a swamp, then we could leave up your ambush on the road. I mean, our opponent can't just keep sitting back and doing nothing now. They're going to have to start interacting more than just venturing into dungeons. They're going to have to start putting some stuff on the battlefield here. Probably worth it to venture at least one more time so that they can draw the card off of completing their dungeon. But it's not any dungeon with the Archlich. You need to specifically... Wow, okay. We've twice now we've been up against white opponents that just don't play any white creatures. It's kind of brutal. Wow, they're actually going to blink their Silver Raven? I guess blinking either of these doesn't really matter. I guess that makes sense. Sure. We'd really love to blink, or draw something that's worth blinking with this Teleportation Circle. Just blinking Dawnbreaker Cleric's not anything. Jesus, okay. We are committed to drawing the weird half of our deck, huh? Alright, we're gonna Warlock class. This is gonna tap us out of black, but I want to dig and try to find something worthwhile here. White Dragon, Precipitous Drop. I guess we take the White Dragon. Would be nice to take this Swamp, but yeah, let's take the White Dragon. And then we can go ahead and play Teleportation Circle. Even though we can't do much with it at the moment. No attacks. Because we're going to be able to blink White Dragon with it next turn. Is there anything we want to get out of their graveyard? No. We'll just gain 2 life. That's going to be pretty hard to race in a vacuum. And if we can ever ultimate both of these Warlock classes, it's going to be brutal for our opponent. It is kind of weird we only have 2 black sources. Would have been nice to leave up 1 more black mana to leave up this Ray of Enfeeblement. But that's not the way it is. Would also be nice to draw like a Thieves Tool. Some way to make a treasure token. Alright. Here comes Zacerak. They're going to get to finish the dungeon and draw a card here. Yeah. And I imagine they start heading into the Tomb of Annihilation at this point. So that they can actually get their 5/5 on the battlefield. It's got some good effects once it hits the battlefield, but it actually needs to attack, so we can kind of keep it tapped down with White Dragon at that point. Yeah. Tomb of Annihilation does deal some damage to them, though. So, especially if they want to go through the Oubliette to make it as short as possible. So that's good for us. Yeah, here they go. Tomb of Annihilation. Makes sense. And another Silver Raven, sure. Our opponent's deck is kind of not super threatening, but we have kind of drawn awkwardly enough this game that it's been an issue. Okay, another Swamp's nice. We will go White Dragon, tap down Air Cold Elemental, go to combat, attack with both. They block the Horde Robber, take 1. But now we get to start blinking this White Dragon every turn to keep their board tapped down. We can leave up your ambushed on the road to protect the White Dragon if they have any removal spells. And we have this Ray of Enfeeblement to deal with this Dragon land if they ever activate it. Or any other white creature, assuming anybody in this game plays white creatures. So far there's no evidence of that besides ourselves. Looks like they may be thinking of a removal spell. But again, we got the solution to pollution, if that's the issue. I'd love to just draw like a vampire or something. Just something that can attack a little bit better than a 1/3. Yeah, so we're gonna go bounce it back to our hand. Oh, they have a instant speed removal spell too. There's nothing we can really do about an instant speed removal spell. on top of another removal spell. At least it forces them to use both the removal spells on one creature. But we'd very much like to actually have our dragon live here if it's possible. Alright. He gets to live. Sounds good. Now we get to attack with Dawnbreaker Cleric and Horde Robber. And we're getting to the point where these Warlock classes, even though they've been kind of sitting there doing nothing for a while, our opponent's going to have to keep them in mind, right? Because even with just these two dorks, that's 4 damage. They're only at 10 life. So, let's see what they do. I imagine they can't go through the Oubliette. I think they have to sacrifice a little bit too much. They're doing it! Oh my gosh! Wow, okay, well I respect our opponent immensely. This is... They're doing the... I think this is the right move, to be honest, but it is a hefty price to pay. Oh, they actually had a bounce spell, too. That's what they were thinking of. Can I afford to bounce this white dragon? I guess, yeah, it wouldn't have really changed anything to bounce the white dragon, would it? Never mind. They were thinking of, do they want to bounce anything this turn, I guess. So they're going to have to sacrifice a Silver Raven, I assume. And probably just sack like a swamp, I guess. I've never actually seen someone take the Oubliette before now. So kudos to the opponent. The ball is on this guy. Achilles 13 does not play around. I guess you can't see his name, but I think I said it at the beginning. His name is Achilles 13, and he's a cool guy. He knows what's up. Alright. Sack some stuff. Sure. What happened to the other... Oh, they had to sacrifice an artifact, too. Okay. Well, here we get to... Is there any reason we should just activate both of these Warlock classes? I guess we can only activate one. Okay. Let's just attack. And we could Orcus here and get back a vampire spawn. We could also White Dragon plus... Let's Orcus. We put them in such a bad position if we do this. So if we Orcus just for max. So, crack this for red. We've got... Can we... Oh man, we should have done this pre-combat, shouldn't we have? So let's go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2... 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. I guess we can't get them back both anyway. Let's just do 3. 1, 2, 3. Yeah. Get back vampire spawn. Drain our opponent. Go to the end step. Drain our opponent. Got him down to 4. And we can still leave up Ray of Enfeeblement, which we will definitely need. Because they are definitely running white creatures. Alright, so this should be game. We have a big trampling Orcus. We have a blink, the ability to blink this vampire spawn, and that's enough to just kill our opponent with this Warlock class, because we can ultimate the Warlock class, blink the vampire spawn, and that's enough to just kill them, even without attacking with anything. But outside of that, we've got them dead. Really, these Warlock classes are just like the nail in the coffin. The threat of activation on these means that they really can't just kill our creatures and expect to live. They really need a way to just stop all damage, period, which is going to take some card that doesn't exist. Applaud them for bringing out the getting all the way there with Acerak, though. At least cast it. I want to see the token. Yeah, here we go. All right, opponent is cool. We're gonna get to see the token they make. Look at this thing. What? Oh yeah, they bounce it back, then they make the token of the Atropol. Look at him. Ooh, look at that thing. A 4-mana Death Touch God. Or a 4/4 Death Touch God, so not the most impressive god, but a god nonetheless. And this should be game. Yep. Because we can just... Really, we can just White Dragon here. White Dragon... kill you with the Orcus. I guess there's some possibility that they have the spell that deals 5 damage to an attacking creature. That could be kind of annoying. I mean, they're still pretty much dead, but I think it would buy them one more turn if they had that. Divine Smite. Target creature, planeswalker, opponent controls phases out. If that permanent is black, exile it instead. Holy moly, that was nowhere on my radar. Alright. Well, you live for one more turn. We could blink the Vampire Spawn, but I'd rather just take the Acerak out of the equation here. Next turn we can go crazy. Just activate Warlock class, you know, attacking with everything. Blink Vampire Spawn. I guess we wouldn't have won even if we had ultimated Warlock class here anyway. If we had ultimated Warlock class and planned to win by blinking Vampire Spawn, they could have still just Divine Smited the Vampire Spawn in response. And we probably would have been in worse shape, to be honest. Okay. Each opponent sacrifices an enchantment. Sure. We've got enchantments to spare. They give their creatures menace. We don't really care. We're so far away from dead. Yeah. We'll sacrifice a Warlock class. Alright. Here we will... Yeah. Go to combat. Attack for 4. Alright. Opponent doesn't have any blockers, and they go to 0. Alright, so... Our opponent had a kind of a weird deck. I've never seen anybody actually go through the oubliette, so more power to them. Cool stuff. Alright, sweet. On to the next one. Alright, up against Becerris, and we will keep this. Kind of a weird hand. Kind of a hand we would wish to go second on because of this Loyal Warhound. I'll have to decide if we want to actually play it. What is with the Silver Ravens? People would play in these Silver Ravens. I don't get it. I don't get it. Alright, I think we actually... I mean, we could play the Loyal Warhound and then play Raven Feeblement to get the Silver Raven out of the way, but I don't want to spend a Raven Feeblement on a freaking Silver Raven, to be honest. We'll have to decide if we want to power word. Okay, opponent's not going to play anything, and we're not going to use removal on a freaking Silver Raven, so... Vampire Spawn. Get you gone. I don't know if we're ever going to get a land off this Loyal Warhound. That's why I didn't play him on turn 2, but... That we might need to kill, because it's going to basically make all of our removal spells not really removal spells, so... yeah, I think we power word kill this thing. They're going to be able to sack creatures in response to us trying to kill them, so... Better to just get that thing gone. So do we want to play the Loyal Warhound? We just keep drawing lands. Yeah, I think at this point, let's just play it. It may trade with a Silver Raven. That may be its lot in life. If we hadn't just drawn like 3 lands in a row, we probably would have held on to it, try to get that other plane so we can hit our 2 white sources for White Dragon. Okay, yeah, let's discard these 2. Whites, okay. So we're gonna go Pegasus, attack. Opponent can white all they want. We're not gonna block the white if they attack with it. I imagine they leave it back on defense to block like the Vampire Spawn slash Loyal Warhound, but if they do attack, ooh, okay, that's a good one. So Wizard class. Well, you can see here, the first one draws them 2 cards, and then the really messed up one is 5 there. Wherever they draw a card. Oh man, that was the worst draw in our entire deck, probably. Oof. Okay, the problem here is white, when white deals damage to something and it dies, they get to leave behind a zombie token. So it doesn't really make sense to try to attack in here and fight through the creatures. But the problem also here is that they're about to ultimate this wizard class, which means they're going to be putting +1/+1 counters on all their creatures. And suddenly this Silver Raven makes more sense. Alright, well, they're not ultimating it right now. Makes me wish we kept that Rave Enfeeblement. If we had known we're going to draw like this, we of course would have discarded the White Dragon. Ugh, now I wish we had kept the Loyal Warhound in hand. I don't know. Precipitous Drop is nice. We could Precipitous Drop the white. We could also Precipitous Drop the Eccentric Apprentice to get the flyer out of the way. I think we're going to get rid of the white. This lets us attack with everything. We're definitely going to scry here. I would have liked that to be a plains, but I don't think we can pass up a land. And technically that does mean Orcus is online here. Probably just trade the Silver Raven and the Loyal Warhound. Oh, okay, they're going to double block, that's fine. Sure. Take 5? That's a lot to take. Yeah, looks like they changed their mind. Pretty easy to die to some burn that way. Okay, now we're not too worried about them just ultimating this wizard's class. Air Cult Elemental is pretty good, though. That's going to slow us down enough that they probably can ultimate that. Okay. We're going to go Drider here. No attacks. Drider, if we pump up Drider next turn and attack in with... Ooh, okay, that's kind of scary. What's with all that Acerax? Alright, our opponent's probably going to pick Mind Mage, I think. Mad Mage, whatever it's called, so that they can gain 2 life here. Oh, they're already in a dungeon, that's right. They don't have a choice. Warlock class, interesting. So we're going to go Pegasus. Make the Drider fly. They are unfortunately just going to be able to block with both their flyers, but we get the Air Cold Elemental out of the way this way. And the Eccentric Apprentice isn't a very good blocker against this Borealia Pegasus. Opponent gets drained for 1, thanks to Warlock class. So we do have a pretty good clock here, and if we ever draw the Blink enchantment, we can just kill our opponent pretty much. Because they have to block this Borealia Pegasus to stay alive. But that'll mean a creature dying, which will mean Warlock class triggers. How did they get +1/+1 counters? Oh yeah, they doubled up their... Okay. Yeah. So next they get to draw 2 cards, sure. We don't really care about them drawing cards. Come on, we want our Blink enchantment. That's what we need. That just wins us the game here. Okay. That doesn't really matter because that's not how we're going to win any... Oh, interesting. Well, it doesn't win us the game, so I think we do this. Huh. Take Cave of the Frost Dragon. Play Cave of the Frost Dragon. We could pump and attack in... No, it doesn't really help us, so we'll just pass the turn. No attacks. They're still in a pretty bad position. The reason I was considering attacking in is because that would drain them for 1 and put them in a not great spot for next turn. Like, we could just basically keep throwing creatures into their deaths so that we could continue to trigger this Warlock's class. Okay, so they're just gonna buff up the Wizard class. Sure, we don't care about that. Soul Knife Spy, sure. Sure. Alright. Now we get to White Dragon, tap down the Eccentric Apprentice, and attack... Is it any creature dies? Yeah. Okay, so we should just win here. Now we get to go White Dragon, Get this out of the way, and then attack and attack. And no matter how... I guess if they block with Hana Pashar, they actually live, don't they? Okay, they can actually block in a way here that... they survive, unfortunately. Oh man, Reaper's Talisman's a really good draw here. Damn, yeah, that's a really good draw. Okay, next turn we should be able to force a combat where... Next turn we should be able to force a combat where something dies. Alright, so they're gonna... Are we better off blocking here and stopping them from drawing? I don't think so. I think having all these attackers in the air is probably better for us, because it gives us multiple ways to win. We can attack in with everything, and with these combat tricks, force a combat that makes at least one creature die. And we also have a really solid attacking force in the air. Okay, so they may... Oh man, they're gonna gain 2 life here though, but I think we still win. They're gonna go through the Mad Mage dungeon, I think. Yeah, gain 2 life. But that still shouldn't be enough to survive this. Okay, so we could activate the dragon, which would tap us out. That would give us 3. They would need to have 2 removal spells, which they could have. They could have Power Word Kill and a bounce spell. If we attack in with everything and use these to force a combat where a creature dies, that would mean they need... Actually, they only need 1 removal spell that way, so I think the best option is Cave of the Frost Dragon. And this gives us a little added benefit of, if they kill our creatures before attacks, we can use your Ambushed on the Road to force through some damage. Actually... Let's see, if they have 2 removal spells, they take 2, and they take 1 additional point from a creature dying. Okay, I think we have to do it like this. I think this leaves them dead. They have the bounce spell. Do they have 2 removal spells? Okay. Whew! God damn. Okay, that was that was another one by the skin of our teeth. Took some thinking. Gaining those 2 life based off of Dungeon the Mad Mage kind of screwed up the math a little bit. Before that, we were considering just attacking without animating Cave of the Frost Dragon. We could attack with everything, and then even if they blocked in a way that a creature wouldn't die, so it wouldn't trigger this Warlock's class, we could pump based on you're ambushed on the road and you hear something on watch to do A, some additional damage with you hear something on watch, and B, make the combat a little bit weirder if we need to with your ambushed on the road. But it didn't quite work out the same when they're at 5 life compared to 3. So we had to get a little. We had to use Cave of the Frost Dragon, and we could have lost here. If they imagine if they had the deal 5 damage to target attack. Well, this right here. If they had set off traps, so in their hand they could have used set off traps to kill Cave of the Frost Dragon. They would have only taken 2 here, then taken 1 additional one off the Warlock class, and we would have been pretty dead on the backswing from our opponent there. So pretty close game. Oof. But we managed to pull it out. Warlock's a little bit better than Wizards, I guess. Our opponent actually ultimated there, so. Alright, on to the next one. Alright, we're up against Lazy Jim, and this is a hard one. I'm going to keep it. This definitely could go wrong pretty easily. Okay. Whew. It could go wrong if we just drew no more lands. We would be stuck with nothing to do, but we have such a good hand. Even if we just draw all swamps, we had a pretty good hand. So, Plains obviously is even better, but... Okay, opponent's on red-black treasure, so... Plundering Barbarian, just going to make another treasure, sure. But the combination of Gelatinous Cube plus Teleportation Circle is seeming pretty good here. That was a pretty good draw, too, because we didn't really want to play this Minimus Containment on a little 2-2. Let's see what they do. They might end up just equipping this Plundering Barbarian and getting us some extra damage. They've got 5 mana here, though. 6, potentially, if they play a land, so it's not like they got nothing better to do. Are they going to do it anyway? Okay, well, here they come. Unblockable 2-2. Actually, though, I'm tempted to just play this Teleportation Circle. But if they kill our Vampire Spawn, that kind of sucks. They probably have a removal spell here, right? I guess I'd want them... Okay, I'm going to play Teleportation Circle. There's a pretty decent chance our Vampire Spawn just dies here. In response to us targeting it. We probably should have attacked first, come to think of it. Actually... Yeah. Oh, wow, they don't have it. Okay. I was going to say, there's a pretty decent chance they just have like a Dragon's Breath or something to kill our Vampire Spawn in response to us trying to blink it. But we'd rather that happen and then be able to blink Gelatinous Cube, right? Okay, so here they go. They had a response but at sorcery speed, so we're okay with that. Man, I wish we could play this Gelatinous Cube and digest the Plundering Barbarian on the same turn. Would it be better just to play Drider? No, I think... I think we play Gelatinous Cube here. They may kill it and get their Plundering Barbarian back, but it's not like that does so much damage. It can't destroy enchantments, it can only destroy artifacts. So if they get another treasure token or something, we don't really care about that. Play Warlock class. And we are not going to blink the Gelatinous Cube this time. No. We don't want to give them another Enter the Battlefield ability from this Plundering Barbarian. So decent chance Gelatinous Cube dies here. If it doesn't, though, we can digest it now and have a repeatable Gelatinous Cube, which was kind of the whole conceit of this deck in the first place, right? The whole reason we wanted to play this deck was to blink our Gelatinous Cube while we're doing black-white in specific. We also have Minimus Containment to deal with pretty much anything, which is nice. Although turning it into a treasure is kind of an additional downside against red-black in particular. Okay, well, we're happy to kill that, though. So we're going to definitely digest. 1, 2, 3. And I guess we should have activated Warlock class first. No attacks. We're just going to keep doing this till they stop us, though. Yes! Yeah, we did it, man. Alright, they had... Okay, Flameskull is actually a brutal card. So it's a 3/3/3/1 flyer that when it dies, it basically comes back, or you can draw a card, and to put it simply. So it's a really annoying card to kill because it just keeps coming back over and over again. But it doesn't come back from a Gelatinous Cube, so this was going to exile it. We were going to be able to digest it. What we probably should have done, though, there was some risk of failure if we did do this, but we should have activated Warlock class for 2 mana and tried to hit a land. If we hit a land, then we could have played that land, activated Gelatinous Cube and digested the Barbarian, and still done this whole thing without missing a land drop. But the risk of that is if we activate Warlock class and then we don't hit a land, then we have to not be able to digest the Barbarian. So it wasn't, I don't know, it was some risk. We just didn't take it, but I think it probably would have been a better play. But they were pretty hard locked behind Gelatinous Cube plus Teleportation Circle, and we did basically draw out the removal for our Vampire Spawn because that was going to be hard for them to beat anyway. Just draining them, draining them for 2 and gaining 2 life every turn would have been pretty brutal against an aggressive deck too. But yeah, we just destroyed this. We got our combo together. We finally drew our Gelatinous Cube, and hell yeah! All right, on to the next one. All right, up against Fernando, and we'll keep this hand. It's pretty meh, but we got our 1 mountain. We got stuff to do. Okay, looks like opponent might be an aggressive deck, which this is not the best hand against. We do have Vampire Spawn to gain us back a little bit of life, and Manticore can eventually block this Ranger's Hawk. But if they just equip it up with like a +2 mace... Okay, Potion of Healing is not particularly scary. Minimus Containment's not bad. Eventually we'll get to Minimus Containment. That should be able to deal with any kind of scary threat that we can't just block. Oh, so they're actually the green-white life gain deck. This is actually the first time I've ever seen this deck. We haven't seen any payoffs for it yet, but we do get to drop a Vampire Spawn, stop some of the damage here. We could have also gone Horde Robber, but I think I'd rather do Vampire Spawn. The benefit of Horde Robbers, we get to kind of attack with it next turn, and most likely they're going to block no matter what. and that means this Manticore is going to get some free value. Alright, again, a couple life. That's pretty good. Alright, so I'm guessing they plan to just venture into the dungeon at this point, because they're leaving back the Ranger's Hawk. Yeah, okay, sure. That's not very scary. Next turn we'll probably just play a Swamp and pass, and try to do this same thing all over again. If they attack with Sylvan Shepherd, we get to flash in the Manticore and eat the Sylvan Shepherd for taking some damage. Alright, so they're fan-delvering it up. Yeah. And we'll just do the Ogre next turn, so we'll just pass the turn here. I think that's better than doing something like attacking and playing a Vampire Spawn here. Their life gain is going to sort of outpace just any sort of attacking damage we can do. Gaining on average 2 life per turn when they attack with this Sylvan Shepherd is going to be a little bit too difficult to race with just combat damage. No attacks. Alright, so they probably know the Manticore's coming, I would imagine. The question is, do they play around it? Or do they just say, it's going to happen eventually. Might as well attack and gain my life while I can. Alright, gained 4 life off the Sylvan Shepherd, which isn't nothing. Block. The good thing is they have to do this as a sorcery with the Ranger's Hawk, so assuming they don't do it right now, we're going to be able to Manticore it if they do anything else in between. So if they see this coming, they may just activate Ranger's Hawk right at this very moment, just to, okay. But now they can't activate it. I guess they could. They don't have the mana to activate it anyway. But if they did have the mana to activate it, they couldn't because Ranger's Hawk is specifically a sorcery. So they would need to do it as soon as the damage was, as soon as they had priority after the damage went on the creature. All right, they're ventured into the dungeon. So far, we haven't seen any life gain payoffs. It just seems like a bunch of Venture stuff. Make a 1/1, sure. I think we'll probably. Okay, sure. I was going to say I think we'll probably offer the trade with this Ranger's Hawk and our Manticore, just to put the pressure on a little bit, but they don't really care about any of that. White Dragon's a little not great here. I think we go attack. We're going to put them in a punishing position for not blocking here. Vampire Spawn. Zombie Ogre was the biggest threat we could have deployed and the most likely to get through. But if their plan is just to sit back with their Ranger's Hawk, they can't really do that right now. Like they need to commit something to the board to not get hit by this Horde Robber. Yeah, okay. Owlbear's pretty good, though. We wouldn't have been able to get through that with our Zombie Ogre either. But now we get to attack with our Manticore. And, yeah, we're going to do that. Attack with the Manticore. Assume they take the trade. Yeah, which means our Zombie Ogre is going to be able to trigger. Zombie Ogre. We get to venture into a dungeon. We'll have to see what we want to do. We would like some mana fixing. I guess the closest is just going down the Lost Mine of Fan Delver. We can also scry our way into a Plains, perhaps. Definitely don't want another swamp. That was a pretty good thing to scry out of the way there. We'll see what our opponent does. I imagine they just hang back on defense with this Owlbear. Eye of Vecna, that's pretty good. That's going to be an extra card draw per turn, and they've got the mana for it, so we need to start pressuring their life if we can. Might mean we have to Minimus Containment this Owlbear, assuming we can find a Plains this turn. Loathsome Troll, okay. I don't really care about the Loathsome Troll. Okay, so we could Minimus Containment the Owlbear. That would mean they trade probably this Loathsome Troll with one of our Vampire spawns. We could also Minimus Containment the Loathsome Troll, which means we couldn't really attack. We could Minimus Containment the Vecna to start their card draw. Yeah. I think what we do is get rid of the card draw. As tempting as it is to get rid of their creatures, I think this is better. Because eventually we'll get the white dragon down to go over the top of these two guys they've got going on here. Alright, that's something that needs to die. Planar ally lets them venture every time they attack with their planar ally. Ooh, Rave Enfeeblement's good. So we're going to go Rave Enfeeblement, the planar ally. We'd rather do it now because they're never going to be tapped out, right? They're never going to be tapped out of mana, so we'd rather if it's like a pump spell that's going to save this thing, we'd rather do it on our turn than their turn. And be able, and if they fail to save it, then we get to trigger the zombie ogre. We get to make a treasure token here, which means white dragon's coming down next turn. So we can tap down the owlbear. Maybe we tap down the loathsome troll, I don't know. Yeah, okay. See, this is what I'm talking about. We would have been hit by this if we hadn't done it. +1. This is +1, +3. Yeah, it's not enough to beat the owlbear. I'm going to attack with a zombie ogre. The reason I do this, they're most likely to block with loathsome troll. Yeah. So now I get to do this. Get rid of the loathsome troll, which means we get to trigger zombie ogre and we get to make a treasure token, which is pretty important because we need to get a flyer down to stop this planar ally. Otherwise, venturing every turn for free is a little bit too much for us to handle. So now we get to white dragon tap down, probably the planar ally, maybe the owlbear. Do they have another pump spell? We could double block with vampire spawn. I mean, if they want a pump spell to kill our vampire spawns, then sure. That does set us up for a pretty bad 2-for-1, but I think I'd rather them do that. Rather than use a pump spell on a creature that actually matters, like white dragon. We don't want them to be able to, like... Okay, they were just offering the trade. Interesting. So they traded their 4-4 for our 2-3. Okay. Because they have a bullet in hand. They completed a dungeon. I didn't realize they had done that yet. Okay, so now we're going to go white dragon. Tap down... Tap down the planar ally. Play Warlock class. Pass the turn. Next turn we can activate Warlock class. No attacks. Dig ourselves. Try to find a bomb to dig to. Okay, there's the life gain payoff. They don't have any more life gain cards. Wow, they drove... I guess, oh no, they do have a way to gain life once. So they can put +1/+1 counters on both of these. That's pretty good. They don't have the repeatable life gain payoffs that they had originally, but they do have some. Yeah, we're going to use both of our black sources. Sounds good. Warlock class. Level it up. Go digging for some cards. Power word kill seems pretty nice. It can't kill the angel, but it can kill Trilasa and also the celestial unicorn. I kill everything else, so we're gonna go power word kill and kill the Trilasa. The Scry is too good. The downside of this is if they have multiple Trilasas in their deck, then killing this now means maybe they scry themselves into another Trilasara. Whereas killing the unicorn would just be you know, pretty much all upside. But I want to benefit off this zombie ogre, and also... So let's go... Let's drain our opponent. I'm leaving back this white dragon because I don't want them to be able to attack with their planar ally. This sets us up to be blown out by a pump spell eventually, but I think it's important not to let them get that value over and over again. At least make them work for it. At least make them have the pump spell. Okay, Prowler doesn't do anything. Alright, well, we're gonna go play Frost Dragon, play Warlock class. And we could hit them for 4 here, which would be 8. What do they get? Okay, they haven't entered a dungeon yet. You know what? I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it. I don't think they have us anywhere close to dead with this board. We have some good blocks. And this deals a lot of damage to them. It gets them on a pretty fast clock. Alright, put Loathsome Troll back in their hand, sure. Oh, Lee, Mother of God. Well, they're going to make a lot of treasure with this old Gnawbone. So they're going to gain some... The way they're going to survive this is they're going to gain some life off of going down to the dungeon of the whatever. Yeah. Do we want to double block the Celestial Unicorn? I guess so. Let's just Zombie Ogre plus Robber. Sure. We're gonna have to trade with this thing eventually anyway, and I'd rather not give them 5 treasure tokens. This way they don't have enough to recast the Loathsome Troll, which is nice. Gives us one more turn of freedom from that thing. Orcus. Okay. So Orcus... First off, I could activate Cave of the Frost Dragon, but they have Old Gnawbone to survive that. I could Orcus. So my mana here is 4, so I can Orcus for 4, which doesn't wipe enough of their board to be worth it. I could get back a Vampire Spawn, which is going to be a lot of damage. It's going to be 4... It's not enough to kill him, though. I'm gonna Manticore, I think. They're forced to block here. They have to block this white dragon. They have to. But that lets me get back Manticore, which kills Old Gnawbone, which means between Orcus and the Cave of the Frost Dragon, I get to get back... Okay, so 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. I could also do -4 and kill everything on the board, except for Bullet. You know what? Maybe that's better. No. Do I want to kill just all Old Gnawbone or kill their whole board? It just leaves Bullet. This puts me down to 12. They can attack with Bullet next turn, which will put me down to 7. But then I have them dead as heck if they do that. I think I wiped the board. I was thinking of getting back the Manticore. I think it's actually better for me to wipe the board here. Pumping the Direwolf doesn't save it. All they're left with is a Bullet here. And a Loathsome Troll in hand. So they're super reliant on drawing something good here, and I've got them super dead because I can attack with Orcus, which is just lethal by itself next turn thanks to Warlock class. I can activate Cave of the Frost Dragon if they find a way to kill Orcus. And just playing the troll is nothing. Okay, they drew a land. Okay, I think I played that right. Ooh, that was a little bit... I'm not 100% sure that getting back the Mana Core wouldn't have been better, but I think that was fine. I think the way I did it was fine. It put them in a position where they needed to top deck perfectly, and took away some... It took away some of their top deck options. Like, imagine if they drew that, give all your creatures +1/+1, or all your creatures +2/+2 effect. That would be, you know, really bad for me. And that made this not an issue. I think this limited the number of top decks they had that actually mattered. In retrospect, I should have attacked with everything if that was what was going to be my plan. I was thinking of getting back the Mana Core and just killing Old Gnawbone when I originally attacked. But if I was going to do this, I should have attacked with everything, because that means they probably would have blocked with their bullet as one of their beefier creatures, and that means it would have died too. So it would have really put the nail in the coffin. But all in all, I think it was fine. So sweet, we ended up winning anyway. So still had this Cave of the Frost Dragon, even if they found an answer to our Orcus. So we should have won pretty much regardless there. All right, sweet. We have managed to crawl back after kind of a not so great start where we didn't draw super well. We are here at the final, so no matter how this goes, this is the end. Because we lost 2 at the beginning, that means that if we lose this one, we're out. We're at our 3 losses. Or if we win this one, we're at our 7 wins. So either way, this deck has done pretty damn well. It's gotten all the way to the end here. Yeah, I think I keep this hand. It's a little sketchy if I don't draw additional lands, but Warlock class should be able to take me to lands. And once I get Teleportation Circle online, that does beat most decks. Alright, drawing a land there's pretty ideal. Say hello back. And I'm more okay with playing Dawnbreaker Cleric now, even though I'm probably just going to gain 2 life, because I can blink it later. Alright, yeah, we'll just play it. Play this, gain some life. So this deck, I think, has performed pretty amazingly. Okay. Even if this is the end for us in a bad way, I think it's done quite well. Sure, if they want to pump spell me here. Okay, I think we... Yeah, we'll go ahead and activate this. Take the Priest of Ancient Lore seems quite good. We could also take the Mana Core, but I think Priest with this Teleportation Circle coming up seems really nice. Yeah, no attacks. So next turn we can Priest of Ancient Lore. I think I want to wait to Gelatinous Cube until I can Gelatinous Cube and Digest in the same turn, which will be 6 mana. Okay, maybe not. Maybe I just eat the Owlbear. It will suck if they have an answer to this, if they have a removal spell for Gelatinous Cube, because then I get they get to draw another card, but I think this is the right way. If they don't have it, they basically lose here. No attacks. Do you have a removal spell? Okay. So far the answer is no. No? Okay, you want to pump spell, kill my Dawnbreaker Claret? Go for it. Not blocking with the Gelatinous Cube. Pretty dangerous to do so. Just any pump spell means that we get absolutely wrecked. Alright, I think they probably did have a pump spell and just didn't want to use it there. Okay, so we're gonna... I think we just... I guess we can't actually digest it this turn, can we? So maybe we just go Teleportation Circle and blink Dawnbreaker Cleric. And that sets us up for next turn. No attacks. Blink the Cleric, gain some life back. And now, even if they do find a way to kill this cube, which it doesn't seem like they have at the moment, even if they do find a way to kill it, we, between this Priest of the Ancient Lore and this White Dragon, we have enough other good blink targets that it's not the end of the world. I imagine they just, like, pump this pack leader if they don't have a removal spell here. But we can just sort of outdo this, right? It's not even a big deal. Especially because it's going to be nothing to digest this pack leader. Sure, hit us for 8. Go for it, bro. Alright, we're going to digest for 5. Get rid of the owlbear. Attack with Gelatinous Cube. Blink Gelatinous Cube. Get rid of the pack leader. Yeah, so they're in pretty dire straits here. We have a removal machine on board. Every turn we're going to be just really blowing them out. Yeah, no, go ahead. Hit us for 3. If we need to, we can start blinking Dawnbreaker Cleric to gain some life too. We might do that... Wow, another owlbear. That's pretty good. We might do that just so we can play this white dragon on a turn. First and foremost, let's just eat this thing. And... yeah, I guess we just eat the owlbear. If we do that, we're gonna... yeah, we're not gonna be able to digest it this turn anyway, so let's just Priest of Ancient Lore. Draw a card, gain a life. No tax. Blink our cube. Eat the owlbear. Yeah, we're just... this is such a good combo. This is such a good combo. Gelatinous Cube, Teleportation Circle. Holy crap, man. Okay, they may have a removal spell for Gelatinous Cube, which would be bad. Because now they have the double red. And that might have been what they were missing to do like a fireball and kill this Gelatinous Cube. Which would be... it would not be good for us because we have this owlbear sitting under it. So they would get the owlbear back and draw another card. We're once again just going to take 3 here. I don't think they can do 9 damage to us. So I'd rather keep these ways to gain life rather than double block and potentially lose both of them to a pump spell. Okay, here we're going to go... definitely get rid of this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And no attack. We could do it minus... I guess we could get back Priest or something. First, let's just go... 2. Digest the Null Hunter. Swamp. Precipitous Drop. Get rid of the Death Toucher. We could have played White Dragon here, but I think I want to just get rid of some of their threats. Gain a little bit more life. Yeah, whatever. Don't want another Plains, that's okay. Vampire spawn, gain some life back. No attacks. Blink Gelatinous Cube. Eat Sylvan Shepherd. And yeah, we have just digested their entire deck with this Gelatinous Cube. Man, this is like the ultimate game to go out on. Alright, Earth Cult Elemental. We gotta sacrifice 2 permanents. That's not nothing. I think we go down... Swamp. Oh, we sacrificed 1 permanent, okay. It's 20 that we sacrificed 2 permanents, so... okay, sacrificing a Swamp isn't actually that bad. Okay, we will digest 1, 2, 3. We could also... Yeah, you know what? We're going to White Dragon here. And just blink the Vampire spawn. Gain some life this turn. Because we don't really care if something goes disastrously wrong here and we lose the Gelatinous Cube. Because there's just a Sylvan Shepherd underneath it, so it's not like an Owlbear where they get to draw a card off it and it's really bad for us. This is fine. Alright. Woo! And we won the finals with the ultimate combo. Our whole deck was built around Gelatinous Cube and Teleportation Circle. Man, what a freaking sealed. Yeah. What a freaking pre-release. That's hard to get better than that. So we had a really sweet sort of Mardu Blink deck with Orcus splashed in. We had our one mountain. We also had Horde Robber and Thieves Tools to give us some treasures. We saw that there was a pretty cool little combo blinking Thieves Tools with our Teleportation Circle to make treasure, and ultimately the most powerful combo was these two rares, Teleportation Circle and Gelatinous Cube, to just completely digest, and in some cases multiple creatures, and in the last case every creature in our opponent's entire deck in a row effectively. But yeah, this was a really sweet deck. We could have definitely gone red-black instead, just straight up red-black and just thrown all the white stuff to the wind. We actually had a pretty good green too, and these two Brunors, I don't know if we really had the rest of it set up to and take advantage of red-white, but they were pretty tempting. Maybe that's enough reason to run red-white and do +2, but ultimately we picked the most fun option, which is try to take advantage of Teleportation Circle and Gelatinous Cube, and man did it pay off. We won our games, and yeah, we're going to claim our prizes. I hope if you watch this and you hadn't done a pre-release before or hadn't done a sealed event before, this gave you some idea of how it was done, especially on Magic Arena. Again, I just want to give one more warning that it's, you know, I made my gems back, and typically you do if you win the event or come get 6 wins at least, I think you make your gems back. But besides that, you typically lose your gems. Typically, if you want to build a collection on Arena, it's just better to draft. That's the best return on your investment. You only need like 4 or 5 wins to basically make your money back in Arena. In drafting, it's just more difficult with Sealed, and with Sealed you have less control over what you... It's a lot more easy to just end up with a pool that doesn't really work in Sealed, whereas draft, if you're going for a strategy, you tend to at least have a kind of functional deck. Our deck was awesome though. So I hope you enjoyed watching. I sure enjoyed playing. This was an awesome deck, and this has been 2D. I'll see you guys next time.
Once I was the ape of the